right, we are live.
Welcome to episode 22 of The Team House. Big episode 22.
I'm Jack Murphy. This is
David Park.
Dave Park, and our guest today, Emil Praslick. Thanks so much for coming on today. I know, we pulled you away from family time and the holidays and everything, so that we could come here and talk your ear off about marksmanship. And anyway, that's really your background. Is you started off in Ranger Battalion, then served in the Army Marksmanship Unit for a long time.
Yep.
Really, your speciality is long-range marksmanship.
Yes.
And now you continue to work in the industry, working in ballistics.
Yeah, as you say, I retired from the Army in 2015, and then I took a job for a company in the industry. So I'm a business development guy for military projects and military sales for a company that makes bullets, ammunition, things like that. So we have some of our components are in current Army programs. So I kind of shepherd those and just out there being part of the big military industrial complex that everybody warned everybody about.
That Eisenhower warned us.
Everybody warned us, and I'm out there trying to fleece Uncle Sam.
You're playing the mandolin for them.
100%.
So, are you going to be able to tell us who shot Kennedy tonight?
With the magic bullet.
Well, we have a laboratory in Finland, and
yes.
So I know where the shovel is.
Yeah, nice.
Well, I feel like we're really lucky to have you here today because you are the guy that you should be teaching the master class on long range marksmanship, and tonight we're going to get to talk a little bit about that. Probably the people who are tuning in will have a few questions too that we'll get to. But I feel like my friend Jim West, who's a retired warrant officer from 7th Group, is the guy to talk to about martial arts in hand-to-hand combat. He's been doing it since 1977 when he was a kid, and he's a grandmaster in his system now. As far as it comes to fucking people up with your bare hands, he's the guy to talk to.
Right.
You're the guy to talk to about long-range marksmanship, and I feel like both of you guys have that expertise in their particular subject, but also you both have this real strength. I think maybe your true strength is as teachers, and that you've passed a lot of this knowledge on to people over the years. And we were talking a little bit earlier before we got started about your time in the Army Marksmanship Unit, and you were also a coach, right?
I was a coach. Yeah, one way to be a successful guy in any field is to outlive your competition, right? Just through attrition. There are some really fantastic guys that do what I do as well, that train military guys. I'm just but one of those guys right now. I do some of that work now. But my forte is really about wind reading at long range and at extreme long range. But yeah, that was I think the thing I enjoyed the most about being a coach at the Army Marksmanship Unit was my opportunity to get a chance to teach people. Not only my own shooters, we had guys that shot competitions for the U.S. Army, but also getting a chance to go out and work with everybody from, regular 11 Bravos at the 101st to, a combat support battalion guy at Fort Story, Virginia, or working with guys in SOF, Rangers and SF and cats like that. So that was really the true enrichment for my career. That's what I treasure the most about my military career, is the opportunity to go out there and share with guys. And I'm learning as much as I ever taught each time I go out to, if I'm out there working with guys and they're pipe hitting dudes, that's not me. I'm a marksmanship guy from the AMU. My guys shoot on golf courses, but I would internalize, get the stuff that they needed, and that would change the way that I taught it, so it was more applicable to them, where they could get more value out of it.
Because you're learning how people learn.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And they're bringing back, experiences from overseas. And
exactly
telling
right.
Practically what they're experiencing.
Well, they also need to apply probably the fundamentals that you're teaching. Well, I know we're not saying fundamentals anymore, but the lessons, the essentials that you are teaching them, but they can't always do it in an ideal world the way somebody on a marksmanship team might be able to. Yeah. So what you have to do is, if you're training guys for operational stuff, is you have to distill down the higher up the pyramid you get,
guys have less and less time to devote to like learning the
Right,
thing.
right.
So guys are like, bro, just tell me what I need to know.
Right.
So I have kind of different ways, different sort of packages you develop as an instructor. Hey, do we have an hour? Do we have a day? Do we have a week?
Right.
Do we have 2 weeks? And so developed a process about wind reading or putting a number on the wind that I could probably talk about in 20, 30 minutes that somebody could probably use right away.
Right.
Very basic thing, and especially now with the advent of technology and ballistic solvers. So you really have to, there's still one thing that you cannot solve on a ballistic solver or using technology, and that's what is the wind doing. The wind is a non-deterministic variable. It's the single most important or weighted reason why guys miss shots, is missing the wind.
Yeah.
So they have to be able to do that for themselves. They have the best gun, best bullets, best cartridges, best solver, Kestrel, you name it. But if they can't figure out what the wind is doing downrange and put a number on it, they're not going to hit the target.
You know, it's interesting because I think that like people's common, you know, like both Jack and I were snipers, and kind of applying this to that is that I think that civilians tend to believe that when they see a sniper team, that the shooter, the person with the gun, that's the sexy part, that they're the senior person. But really, anybody can squeeze that trigger if they have good basics, and it's really the person behind that spotting scope that needs to know what they're doing and needs to be seasoned and needs to be able to read the wind.
And you see that a million times, like when you're, if you're working in the instruction environment. I talk to guys that are instructors at the various sniper schools, and that's the thing. Like you can watch a shooter or a sniper get complete vapor lock when they're trying to do something, and they like think left is right and right is left. But a good spotter, a good observer is a force multiplier.
Yeah.
You need to have the physical attributes to pull the trigger without moving the rifle and all the things that you have to do. But more and more, even though we train like that in training environment, using a spotter and using having a sniper, I think that happens less and less in an operational environment. The way that snipers are employed, especially in the soft world, is run as fast as you can to where you're going to be, and then everybody is on the rifle, everybody is shooting.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the misconceptions people have about snipers, because there's many out there, and one of them I think is exactly what you're saying, that people still have in their mind this idea of like Carlos Hathcock in Elephant Valley, when the reality, I think, most of the time is that your snipers nowadays are in more of a direct action role, in that they're going out with an assault force, they're pulling Overwatch for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was in the Army the first time in the 80s, I was a machine gunner. So we were like usually in a support by fire position for raids and things like that. And so you have all three guns for the platoon are all together, and you're like talking to the guns and all that other stuff that you do. But now, we and every once in a while we would have one of the snipers up there with us. But I mean, if you think about it, that ability to mass aimed fire, having a group of guys together so they can communicate with each other, that is an absolute soul crusher to whoever you're shooting at. Especially with the level of the competence of the guys. I mean, I'm so impressed when I see the guys out there that I get a chance to work with. I mean, just how good the rifles are, how good the ammo is, how good shooters guys are, how much opportunity that, like, especially guys in SOF, whether they're Rangers or SF dudes, have the ability to go and train with instructors and shoot at places that aren't, range 66 on Fort Bragg or Burroughs range on Fort Benning. So getting all those different looks and at terrain and everything else. So, I mean, I would say our modern sniping capabilities are the best that they've ever been, and I don't think there's anybody that does it as well as the U.S. guys do.
Since you have all this experience too, going out and training all sorts of different people, conventional, military, all the way up to the top guys. I mean, what are some of those misconceptions that you think the public has about snipers and what snipers?
Or even long range shooting when it comes to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the whole, like, the one thing that gets me when I, if you read stuff or you watch a movie and, like, this concept of, like, the guy's, like, waiting to time his shot between his heartbeat and, like, shit like that. You're like, well, maybe. I don't know. I was never able to kind of to time my shot between a heartbeat. And also, for the modern sniper, the fact that, like, shooting is really not a huge part. It's part of the job, but it's probably not even the biggest part of the job for the way that they're used, especially nowadays. All the assets that guy can bring to the fight, his ability to see the whole battlefield, his ability to leverage the technology. You have to be a good shot and have good equipment, but all the other things. I mean, if you attended a military sniper school, you shoot for a few weeks,
right,
and then it's all fieldcraft, and,
right,
trying to learn the actual business of doing the job.
Yeah, I think one of the misconceptions is that you could take a regular sniper, and when I say regular sniper, I mean any given soft sniper, not like a naturally gifted person, or who's just nailing it, or somebody who shoots for fun all the time, they shoot competitively, whatever else. But that I think that if you have a sniper that can shoot a minute of angle at 600, are we talking yards or meters anymore? I don't even remember, but it's 600 yards. That's a competent sniper.
Oh, absolutely. I actually, a good answer to the question about misnomers is the accuracy of the system. Mm-hmm. You see lots of, like, advertisements out there for both rifles and ammunition.
Everyone's submitted
a quarter minute. Yeah.
I mean, we've been able to, because of technology, you can instrument everything. We can measure almost everything now. But we can measure muzzle velocities with portable radar units. There's portable radar units at $500-600 maybe, and you can track the base of that bullet the first 50 yards. So you're getting, laboratory level velocity measurements. So of course on Facebook and social media, guys are putting pictures of, like, how low their standard deviation is or how small their muzzle velocity is, and guys shoot groups and the guys claim levels of accuracy. I've got a quarter minute gun, I've got a half minute gun, I've got this, I've got that. When in reality, like I said, Dave, if you have like an M110 with M118 LR ammunition, or the sniper ammunition that the Army uses, and that rifle and you are even shooting 1.5 minutes of angle, or about, call it about 0.4 mils group size, mm-hmm, at distance, that is lethal. That's as good as it really ever needs to be, and it's probably as good as it gets most times.
Yeah.
Not on a 3-shot group. When I was at AMU and we tested rifles, we test, like, in 30-shot groups, or you aggregate groups to, like, 100-shot groups. Then you look at the data, and then at that point, like, if somebody tells me they have a quarter-minute rifle all day, every day, we'll shoot 20 shots at 600 meters, and if it's quarter minute, you let me know.
Right.
I would be super impressed. Not that they're not out there, but it's almost unattainable. So a minute to a minute and a half is as good as it ever needs to be, honestly.
Right.
And for people who are, like, watching or totally baffled lay people out there, what do you mean when you say a minute of angle?
So minute of angle and mils are angular measurements that we use in shooting. So we use them for a couple of reasons. We use them to calibrate how much the sights move when we click the scope. So you click the scope, there's a little tube in the middle of a telescope on a rifle. And when you click the knobs, whether it's left or right, which we call windage, and up and down, which we call elevation, it physically moves that tube inside the scope. So if you click to move the strike of the round up, right? We'll say up on the scope, and I come up, click, 10 clicks on the scope. It actually moves that erector tube down inside the scope. So when I move the erector tube down, now I'm pointing lower. So if I want to put the crosshairs on the target, it makes me raise the muzzle, right? So up and down those measurements, we use minute of angle or mil. The military stuff is pretty much all mil, which is a milliradian. And minute of angle stands for is if you look at a 360 degrees of a circle, each degree has 60 minutes. So 60 times 360 is 21,600. So that means that if you were to look at a pie chart, there's 21,600 little minutes of angle all the way around.
So it's much more accurate than a 360 degree compass.
Right. So, in artillery you might use angles, but for small arms, the ballistics, our trajectory doesn't really go that far, so we need a much finer adjustment. And minute of angle is handy because it's linear and it tends to line up with like statute measurements. So 1 minute of angle, that little angle at 100 yards or 100 meters, it's about 1 inch. And at 200, it's 2 inches. So if I were to say that rifle shoots 1 minute of angle and I'm shooting at 600 meters, I should expect about a 6-inch group at 600 meters.
And that's what the weapon system itself is capable of.
Right.
And then you have to account, of course, for the person behind the gun.
Right, and if you can deep dive, Army Research Institute, like ARL and ARI, they've done all kinds of instrumented studies on what a dude can do.
Really?
Yeah. So
like physiologically.
Yeah. So they have and they take these numbers and they factor them into designing total weapon systems. So I think I remember reading one time that they expected a trained military sniper to be able to point a group of about 0.2 or 0.3 mils.
Really?
Yeah, which is about a minute of angle, a little bit less than a minute of angle. So, and that a regular infantry dude was he could point 0.8 mils or 1 mil. So imagine at 300 meters, they're expecting a regular infantry guy to be able to physically hold a rifle and his total group size without factoring in how the rifle shoots or the precision of the ammunition. His total group size of about 1 mil, which at 300 meters is 0.3 meters, which is about 12, 13 inches, about 13 inches. So they would expect that without any other, that guy's physical ability to point the rifle is about a 13-inch group.
Wow.
So, and that's, they take these, these big eggheads, they take all these numbers and we need the total system to do this. And so, therefore, I need the rifle to be able to shoot this well and the ammo to be able to shoot this well. And
now, is that? Are they talking about the average infantry guy,
right?
Or are they talking about a person that you've trained up? And
I'm not sure. I mean, those metrics exist. Is kind of what was my point. So, it may not be 1, maybe 0.9, 0.8, but I remember going into we did some work at AMU with the Army Research Institute. They instrumented my guys.
Right. Really?
Yeah, so they did all kinds of stuff. They put these bands on the guy's chest to see how fast they breathed under stress or when they were calm, measuring pulse rate, measuring blood pressure, and they would have my guys, who were some of the best shooters in the world, they would have my guys shoot different positions, do different things, and that established a baseline of okay, this dude, the best guy there is, this is what he does.
Right.
And so then they would go out and they would do the same measurements on a basic trainee at Sand Hill, and then they would, I think they brought guys over from Kelly Hill, infantry guys from Kelly Hill. I think they had guys from regiment did it too. So that's what they do all day. If you ever talk to any of those guys, they all have you're usually the dumbest guy in the room. I usually was. Everybody's got more degrees than a thermometer.
So
they're just trying to figure it out.
So if we're saying that a standard sniper, or a soft sniper, a trained sniper in the military can shoot 1 minute of angle, which is 1 inch every 100 yards, basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
How does that compare to a national level shooter, an Olympic level shooter, a Camp Perry level shooter?
Well, so we would, and so it was interesting. I actually got the chance to see that firsthand. So at the Army Marksmanship Unit, part of our competitive thing that we did was we went and shot the national championships at Camp Perry, which is on the shores of Lake Erie. The bullets actually land in Lake Erie. So you shoot, the firing line faces due north, and the impacts, the bullets land in the lake.
The EP hasn't shut that down?
Well, you know, they have a chat. What does shut down the range is like guys on jet skis.
Okay.
Like, woo, this is awesome, man. Give me another Keystone Light. And like they drive right where in like
hold my beer and watch this.
1,000 people are shooting, right? So like Coast Guard would go in and
what could go wrong?
But we had a program before the GWAT, and it lasted a little bit after the war started, where we would take a couple of Rangers from each battalion, and we would have them attached. We would get them attached to the AMU, and that got spearheaded by the 3rd Ranger Battalion sniper platoon, which I think set the standard for, at least within the Ranger Regiment, of how that was supposed to happen. Jack, you were a member of that group. So you're just like some, mountains of men, like real legends in that community of those guys that are running that. So we took 2 guys from 1st Battalion, 2 guys from 2nd Battalion, 2 guys from 3rd Battalion, and we did that for a couple of years. So these are guys that they're really good shots. Like they're really good at everything that they do. They have to be to be in that job, It was great for my guys, because my guys and you guys, they didn't have any of that experience. They joined the Army to shoot in the AMU. They were recruited specifically to come and shoot for the Army Marksmanship Unit, right? So now they're like next to, a real freaking Ranger, and they got to see like, oh, okay. Well, actually, we had guys that intrigued them enough that they went and did SFAS, or they did other stuff in the Army because they got motivated by.
So there were also Rangers that went over to AMU and didn't want to leave.
Yeah. That is true. It was a pretty sweet gig. I mean, a lot better than a 25-mile road march.
Yeah.
Beats a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. So, but the biggest thing was watching those guys try to make those adaptations to the style of shooting that we did. So the style of shooting that we did was completely different, so it really isn't a fair sort of metric. But what I will say is that those guys, all those Rangers, and we've had guys from group, different guys from group be attached to us in that same sort of program over the years. The rate at those guys that those guys learn is, their curve is the fastest I've ever seen out of anybody. The guys that we hired for AMU, the guys that we recruited, they maybe started shooting when he was like 12 years old. And it was like his local shooting team in Pennsylvania or something like that. And then when he was in 17, 18, we would approach him and say, hey, you want to come in the Army and shoot for the AMU? They go through basic training, they go through AIT, then they report directly to AMU as a private. And so I had guys, we had a mutual friend, Jared Van Alst, and so Jared was one of those guys. So Jared showed up, shot like a summer for us.
I think he was a team leader.
He was
375,
and so he finagled, and he's like, "Hey, I kind of want to go over to AMU for a couple of years." So he comes over, and for real, within 6 months, he was shooting as well as half of my team that had been doing it for like 10, 12 years.
He was scary good.
And I would tell these guys that we'd have, and it was pretty. Every once in a while, you get a guy that just couldn't do it, and that's like a physiological thing. We had one guy. He was an aggressor in mountains.
At Ranger School.
Right. So we had a couple of those guys come down one year. I think we had four or five of them, and this guy, he was awesome, and he was a physical animal and freaking great soldier, but he physically couldn't stand still.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I'm like, dude, just stand there and don't move. And he moved.
Personality, yeah.
He would tell me, he's like, yeah, my dad used to like whack the crap out of me because I was like holding the flashlight and he's working on the tractor. He's like from Kansas or something. And like the flight would be moving. Like, so he just was incapable of standing still. Yeah. So you do get those guys.
Yeah.
But ordinarily, you can, if somebody wants to do it, shooting, you can teach them how to do it, which is why it's such a great sort of activity.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on something, because there is a misconception within the military, and one that I think I had as well, that, this competition shooting is a bunch of bullshit. This stuff where we're going to go out to the flat range, we're going to have the sling around our arm, and we're going to shoot at these yard lines. Like, this is bullshit. This isn't how it works on operations.
Right.
But Jared Van Alist and others were very accurate in saying that, no, actually you go and you really put yourself into this and apply yourself to this,
right,
and you will learn lessons that are absolutely going to make you a better combat sniper.
I think that's true. The caveats to that are, obviously for competition shooting, it's competition shooting, right?
Right.
So like, hey, I've got to lie down a certain way, or I have to sit a certain way because that's the rule.
Right.
Right. And I have to use a sling because I'm not allowed to stabilize the rifle any other way. Right. But working within that construct, you're really training sort of pure marksmanship. You're still training sight alignment, you're still training trigger control, you're still training reading the wind, all those things. So trigger time is trigger time. I mean, if you look across the board, I know lots of guys in special operations, and they're all shooting USPSA. They're shooting PRS. They're shooting the Precision Rifle Series. So, and those hey, you're putting your body into unconventional positions. You're shooting at steel under time pressure. Yeah, you're not in a tactical environment. You're not wearing full kit. You're not doing it at night. But steel sharpens steel, and competition shooting, at least for the stuff that we did, especially for snipers, I think was incredibly relevant because it taught you in a controlled environment what the physical effects of the wind did. That was the biggest single thing. Yeah, number one, guys are all competitive, especially guys in those units. They're all meat eaters, so they want to do well. It was the funniest thing. Sometimes you go to Camp Perry and there'd be some fat little 15-year-old girl that would whip the shit out of an E7 Green Beret, and he was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
So that guy would then go work harder.
It's not about your deadlifts, bro.
Yeah.
So, but the ability to see when you go to, as you guys know, you guys are both snipers. When you go to the range, you're at the range maybe a half a day. You got a couple cans of ammo. You meet your training objectives or whatever it is. You're going out there to get dope on the rifle. You're going out there to true your kestrel. You're going out there just to work some drills, shoot movers. But then you're done.
Right.
So in one summer, the guys would join us in June, and then we would take these guys all the way to August, which is why it pretty much ended when the war got going, because you just can't really expect units to let one of their best assets go for a couple months, right? But they would see more of these sort of situations, these simulations of wind, having to solve these problems of reading the wind, making choices. The good thing about competitive shooting is that it's a direct feedback loop, right? You've got the shot on the target, that gives you feedback. Then you get to go, what did I do? Where was the crosshair when I pulled the trigger? Well, it was here. The shot ended up there. Was I moving? No, I wasn't moving. Was the wind blowing? The wind is blowing. Which way is it blowing? Holy shit, I didn't even see that. Next shot, wind's doing the same. Now I'm going to aim upwind that much because that's how far I was downwind last time. Boom, you shoot the shot, you see the result, and then that whole decision loop starts again. And that training of figuring that out is huge for a guy. Huge for a guy. So I think there's value in it.
You find it speeding up the more guys spend out at the range.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any competitive shooting thing is its own rabbit hole. I won't defend it too hard because it can be a thing. Okay, well I've got this jacket and I've got to do this and do that and do that. Is that what it's about? Is that what it's about? And is that aiding that guy?
It's like being a ranger wasn't really about having a high and tight,
Right. Well, it was when I was there.
Yeah.
Well, we should go back to the haircut.
So when we're talking about pure accuracy, are the people at a national level that are competing at a national level, are they shooting a half minute, a quarter minute?
So when I was good, and I wasn't a fat fuck like I am now, when I was good, and other elite level shooters at 1,000 yards, we'd shoot these prone rifles. They're the caliber 300 Winchester Magnum, then 6.5, 284, all these 7mm type Magnum rifles. So I had crosshairs, and my hold using a sling without any other support was about 2 maybe to 3 inches out of 1,000 yards.
Oh my goodness.
That's how much my crosshair would move. And that's probably typical within that. Now, guys that were shooting standing without any support, your elite level guys can probably physically point a rifle with no other support within about a 5-inch hold at about 200 meters, just standing up.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is, but you're shooting one shot.
So that's, like I said, I think that's one of the misconceptions of, I think that people think of soft guys as being these awesome hand-to-hand guys, awesome pistoleros, awesome, snipers, or these amazing shooters. And the thing is that they are if they pursue that outside, but there are so many tasks.
Oh yeah.
There are so many tasks.
You can't be proficient
shoot, move, communicate that you have to do, and as a sniper, 80% of the job is mission planning, is getting in and more importantly, getting out once you've taken that shot. So to think that your standard, even special operations sniper is a world-class shot, if that person is not, if he is not like a competitive shooter,
right.
They're shooting at a high level, at a high functional level that the job requires, but they are not. You can't put them on a line at like Camp Perry and expect them to.
And I mean, both of you guys know full well. I mean, as a Ranger sniper, and I'm sure it's probably true in any other units out there. Yeah, ideally, we all wish we could go out to the range for 15 minutes a day and shoot like at AMU.
Right.
But the reality is, we would have these training periods where you're out at the range 4 days straight, and then you're not out at the range at all for 2 months.
Right.
So it's very, like you said, unless you're pursuing.
And you're sitting there and you're waiting for range control to come out and open the range. Then you've got to get everything closed up so range control can come out and close the range. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God.
All of the other responsibilities you have.
Right.
Being your airborne qualifications, and staying current, and the tactical stuff, and mobility.
And that brings up a really important point that I always try to make to guys. When I still do have the opportunity to work with guys to train now, and the one thing I try to transmit is that when guys go out to the range, a lot of times, if you're an operational guy, you're going to the range for a reason, right? And you just you're getting it done, you leave, but take a pause while you're there and work on marksmanship.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. Look at your hold. Now you're not in a sling with a giant rifle and a $3,000 scope, or they are now. They're actually more expensive now, the scopes that the snipers have. But if you have your movement as this, try to get your movement smaller. Make small adjustments. Make a small adjustment to your bag.
Yeah.
Are your bipods set up the way you want to set them up? And experiment to work on marksmanship. That's something a lot of military snipers don't get a chance to do, because once they get put in the job, it's like, that's the job.
Right.
And so when they do go to the range, a lot of times it's, hey, I got a new scope. I got to get the scope zeroed. I have to get 100 meter zero. I have to true my ballistic solver at a certain range so that if I have to go and do something tomorrow or next week, I'm ready to go. I'm operational. So, but taking that moment, taking that pause to actually work on marksmanship is super important. Really.
And when I was at 18 Bravo, I think I used to drive my team a little nuts because I'd have them do dry fire drills at the range before we started shooting.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah. I mean, it can sound like a kind of a dated...
Like we're going back to BRM.
Kind of a dated thing to do, but, you should be watching your crosshair, and you should know exactly where that crosshair is when you shoot. I mean, that's what a big thing that I see is, I still shoot competitively, and... I do the long range thing. And so I shot in England this last summer at their national championships. And I would kind of write down at the end of the day and make little notes to myself, kind of debrief myself. And if I shot 100 shots in that day, honestly, I probably shot 10 shots that were perfect. Just 10, maybe. Yeah. The other ones were a little left, a little right, a little high. They weren't bad shots. They were still in the center scoring rings, but I knew where they were. And so when I got on the range, especially with young guys, you're like, where'd that one break, man? Center, perfect.
Yeah.
Every shot center?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Because
you're not critiquing yourself.
Right, because that actually has real effects to the accuracy of your zero.
Right.
If you're not breaking them exactly in the middle, if you're breaking them on the right side and you have shots on the right side and then you click left,
Right.
then when you're in a no-win condition, you go out there the next time, where's your shot going to be? It's going to be left of where you think it's going to be because you've clicked yourself that way. So the accuracy of the data, these ballistic solvers are very advanced now, but they're only as good as the data you feed it. So, we're talking about the accuracy of a person, the accuracy of these different weapon systems. So, in mils, milliradian, there's about 6.2 radians in a circle. So the old trigonometric formula or equation for circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, right? So if your radius is one of anything, say 1 meter or 1 mile or 1,000 meters, and you draw a circle, that circle is going to have a radius of 2 times pi times the radius. So if the radius is 1, your circle is going to have a radius of 6.283 radians. So think of a radian as kind of like a sixth of a pizza slice, around there. And a milliradian is 1/1000th of that 1 radian. So, and mils are great for these angles we're talking about because a mil is 1,000th of that radian. It's 1,000th of whatever the radius is. So if I'm shooting at 1,000 meters, 1 mil is 1 meter at 1,000 meters.
Okay.
If I'm shooting at 1,000 yards, 1 mil is 1 yard at 1,000 yards, right? So my experience tells me that a really good, say, M110 and shooter is probably out to say 800 meters, 900 meters, is probably good for about between 0.2 and 0.4 mil group size. Like 0.2, 0.3, that's a fantastic rifle and shooter and ammo. They could be as big as, say, up to 0.6 and not be deadlined and be within the acceptable margins for performance, right? So that means that my group size at 1,000 meters is, say, 0.3 mils. That means it's 0.3 of a meter at 1,000 meters. So it's 0.3 of a meter. So it's 30 centimeters, right? Is that right? So, no, it's not right. So you've got, if there's like about 39 inches in a meter, so 10% of a meter is like 3.9 inches.
Yeah.
So it's 3 times 3.9. So that means that at its best, that gun is shooting around
12 inches.
12 inches
Yeah.
at 1,000 meters.
Now, 12 inches, when they say it's shooting at 12 inches, that's the spread the naturally occurring spread
Right.
you can expect when you shoot that gun at 1,000 meters.
Right. So that means that if I'm correcting my zero at distance, and say my gun doesn't shoot 12 inches, say it shoots 18 or 20 inches, which is more realistic at 1,000 meters. And I'm trying to true my ballistic calculator, my Kestrel, all these different devices. I can induce error because I am overstating.
You're poisoning the data.
I'm poisoning my data.
Right.
Because there's a way that these ballistic solvers work where you have to take your impact that you can see and you're comparing it against the impact that's predicted. That's essentially what you're doing. So then you're trying to align those two things. So like, okay, I know where the bullet hit, bullet doesn't lie, and I know how much elevation I used in my scope, whether I'm holding on my ballistic type reticle in my scope or I'm clicking. And when those things don't line up from my calculator that's on my phone or whatever other device that we're using now, I have to be able to align those things. And there's different ways of doing that. You can change data inputs, whether it's velocity or the sort of the ballistic performance of the bullet in the bullet model. And you do all that and you try to get it aligned, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to predict where that bullet's going to hit at any range. So if my data is skewed, I need to correct my data. But what you see a lot operationally, when you're out there with a guy and he's like bing, bing, he hits left because he misses the wind, he hits right because he misses the wind, he hits low, he finally hits the center of the target like once or twice. He's like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm at 9.8 mils and let me correct myself. Like, but if he shot like another 10 shots,
right,
the whole group might be 0.3 or 0.4 mils. So like my advice is if you have confidence in the ballistic information you're inputting into your device, you have to really be mindful of what your group size is. And don't let hubris get you. Like, so the new guy, that's dead in the middle. It's perfect, the middle. Like, so if you're not right in the middle and you're not accepting that group size, you're not accepting your error, and you're not being honest with yourself, you're not going to have an accurate system.
I feel like also sometimes new guys, because I feel like shooting is similar to driving. When you first start driving, there's so much stimuli, so many different things going on, and you're checking your mirrors, and you're I got to turn my signal, and all this stuff, and then after a while, a lot of it becomes rote. And I feel like shooting is the same way in the sense of, once you start getting your breathing fine-tuned, once you start getting your trigger squeeze fine-tuned, once you start, then the reticle, a lot of times, like the world starts to slow down. So a lot of times the newer shooters, they have no idea where that reticle was when that round went off, because it all kind of happened by surprise and everything.
Well, then let's even get into what constitutes a kill in sniper operations, when you take a shot at a guy from 800 yards away and you just see that silhouette disappear. Now, did that guy get killed, or did he just like drop to the ground and like move to cover?
Right. Well, but I mean, even before that, when you're asking a new shooter, where was that reticle when that round went off, when that trigger broke? And I feel like it takes a while. It takes quite a bit of time behind the gun before like the world slows down enough where you're actually.
Oh yeah, it's like skydiving. When you first start off, you're like, whoa, but then.
But where you're like, okay, that was low right or low left, low right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the things that you have to do first, execute the shot. Like you said, it's a great point, because, if you're thinking consciously of a lot of these things, you see it a lot where. If guys are training in terrain, so where they're not lying on a flat ground at Fort Benning, perfectly flat. If they're like this, keeping the rifle and your sights level is a huge deal. Yeah. Because inducing cant into a shooting platform will cause errors. So, I mean, basically the way it works, very simply, is if the rifle's canted to the right, shots will go low and to the right. If it's canted to the left, shots will go low and to the left, because you got your axis of bore and you got your axis of your sight line to the target. So when you do this, you're actually inducing that error. So guys have like levels on the guns now, which work great, a little bubble level, but you can have all kinds of stuff on them. There's even levels that are electronic. So you have a green light if it's level within like a degree or two, and a red light if it's not level. Yeah. Right? A lot some like competitive shooters are using those now. So in precision rifle, but if it can fool you. So I mean, I've shot like lying in a creek bed up at a target, and like I think my crosshairs are level. I think everything's level, and the guy I'm shooting with is like, dude, look at your level. And like I'm completely not level. Right. I'm like, holy shit. It messes with your sense of what it is. So like all those elements, if they're not right, you're not getting true feedback out of that target. So yeah, you're right. I mean, like
it's like if your zero has been knocked off.
Yeah, and the more you shoot, the sort of the more unconscious those things become. But sometimes, guys hit these sort of phases where their performance plateaus or even goes down. Yeah. And that means that they're taking stuff for granted. Yeah. I mean, I saw that on the competitive side at AMU all the time, where you'd see guys' scores go like that, then they'd start dipping down.
Is it complacency?
Yeah, you're making an error that recoil is hiding. Right. So at that point, the best thing to do is like sort of deconstruct it, strip it back down, maybe even dry fire, maybe even do some exercises where you don't know if the rifle's loaded or not. Just crap like that. Really basic stuff.
Yeah.
They've been doing since the Civil War.
Going back to, ball and dummy drills are amazing when that happens because it really uncovers.
Show you what a fuck up you are.
It can be embarrassing, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to me too. Sometimes I do it unintentionally. Like, I was shooting at Camp Prairie last year, and I had a round that had like a bad primer. So when I pulled the trigger, nothing happened, right? So I'm like this. I'm at 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
I'm like doing really well. I'm trying to win this national championship, and I'm like, holy shit,
yeah,
dude.
right.
Like,
Exactly.
I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
If that had actually gone off, that would have been in the pumpkin patch.
Yeah.
So like scared the crap out of me. I unloaded. I dry fired about 10 times. I'm like, okay, go back. So yeah, all those things. I mean, everything in shooting is like very perishable. I mean, a good analogy of shooting is like land navigation. It's a very perishable skill, and some guys are naturally kind of great at it, some guys aren't. Some guys have to really work hard, and the guys that have to work hard at it, like me, I was telling you earlier today, I don't think I was ever really a talented guy, shooter-wise, but I worked relentlessly. I was tenacious, and I still am for obsessive about shit like that. So I would, but if you're like that, the skills fall off pretty quick unless you maintain them.
Talking about being tenacious, we have not discussed your origin story yet. So, you joined. How old were you when you joined the Army? And
17.
Okay. Now, were you already shooting competitively at that time, or?
Not in an organization in a way. I grew up shooting. My father was a competitive shooter.
Okay.
He shot, NRA high power. He shot for the Navy back in the 50s and the early 60s. He was a really good shooter, won a lot of champions. So it was kind of a thing that we kind of grew up around. What I will say is I had a little Mossberg 22, and my dad welded on a front sight post from an M1 Garand on this Mossberg 22 and cut the stock down and put a set of sights that kind of look like sights of like an M1 or an M14.
Uh-huh.
I never looked through a scope shooting until I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
And so when I joined the Army, and no matter, whenever we went out shooting, it was always some sort of competition. We're trying to shoot the smallest thing you could shoot, And
when you were a kid, or when
I was a kid,
okay.
My brother and my sister my dad would take us out to the range, and we'd go upstate. My grandfather was, and we never shot just the kind of just
plink.
We
Yeah.
were always shooting for small groups and whatever it is. So when I joined the Army, I was naturally good at it.
Yeah.
I had been doing it. My dad had trained me. My dad, there's an exercise called shadow box, which is one of these really old marksmanship training tools. So what you do is, it's kind of dated because we don't use iron sights anymore in military marksmanship. Everything's an optic.
Yeah.
Don't. What the fuck?
There's lots of arguments.
Jimmy's rustled.
Well, there's lots of good arguments to say that,
it's obsolete.
Modern optics don't break.
Yeah.
The amount, and the Marine Corps did a huge study on the RCO or ACOG.
The ACOG's built like a tank.
And they just don't break. They don't. So, you only have a certain amount of time to train Joe. And what should you use to train it on?
What they're going to go into combat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the concept of shooting iron sights is probably important because pistols have a manual sighting system, and lots of machine guns do. Crew serve weapons do. Crew serve weapons have optics on them now too. But so kind of knowing that principle is. But the way the shadow box worked is you'd put a rifle in a rest, and so it was pointing somewhere, right? So if you align the sights perfectly, the sights were pointing at one spot out there. And then what you would do is you would have a piece of paper, and you'd have a bullseye and maybe a 2 or 3 inch disc with a hole in the middle, and you'd move the bullseye around until the guy would tell you that's perfect. So I have a perfect sight picture, center mass, sights are aligned, and then you just take a pencil and you make a hole through the bullseye.
I remember this in basic
right?
training.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right, the shadow box, right? So I remember my dad doing shadow box with me with an M1 Garand when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
Right, I remember. So I was a good shot. I didn't really get a chance to do, because back when I was went through basic training, and I ended up, after volunteering after airborne school at 2nd Ranger Battalion, and I was in a weapons squad. You know, I was kind of a little guy. I was like 5'7", 5'8", and weighed about 140 pounds. So, of course, what do? You put the guy in weapons squad.
Right, or more, yeah, exactly.
To break his soul.
Yeah.
So that's what they did. So then when I graduated air school, I was a gunner at a gun team. But I was always interested in marksmanship. Always trying to show. When I got out of the Army, I got out in '89, early '89, and I started shooting competitively. Because I initially did it as a way to spend some time with my dad. My dad stopped shooting competitively in the '70s. And, you know, he and I didn't really get along really well when I was a kid because, like, you're an asshole when you're a kid, right? So I got out of the Army and I'm like, oh, I was an asshole.
Right.
So I said, hey, Dad, you know, you got all these rifles downstairs and all this shooting equipment. Like, why don't you try doing it? Let's do it again. I'll do it with you. And you can teach me how to do it and way to spend time with him. So I started doing that. I got good pretty quick at the competitive game. And then I joined the National Guard because I got some money to do it on the weekend. And then shooting for the National Guard, I made their all National Guard rifle team. And I was shooting at the national championships. I was on their team for a year.
Wow.
The Army Marksmanship Unit came and offered me a job to go back active duty, and I did that. So that was like in the end of '96. And then I was at the AMU from then until I retired at the October 2015 is when I retired from Fort Benning, and I drove the hypotenuse of America to get away from Columbus, Georgia, to get to Washington.
This is really funny too, because the way you were the first Ranger I ever met, actually, Emil. Mm-hmm. Because your mom golfed on the golf course that I worked on as a kid. I was a semi-professional weed whacker at Pequannock Golf Course.
I remember meeting you as a young man, and I think I asked you, you know, and my mom's like, hey, you got this nice young kid, he says he's going to be a Ranger. You want to talk to him? I'm like, yeah. I was home on leave. And I think I asked him, like, so are you a good athlete? You know, should be running? Are you road marching? How many pull-ups can you do?
How old were you?
18?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, so here's the deal. Show up, be able to run. Being able to run as a private in Ranger Battalion can get you out of a lot of freaking problems.
This is true.
And, like, be strong. Don't be a quitter. Be the guy that selects yourself. Don't let somebody else deselect you. Make sure that you're the guy that deselects yourself.
All very good advice.
And don't quit, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then about, I don't know, a year or so later, I'm in my office in Fort Benning, and one of my best friends, who is Jared Van Alst, is like, hey, Emil, do you know this fucking guy? He says he knows you. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he doesn't know you. Like, he's getting ready to just destroy Murphy because Murphy says that he knows me.
I'm pretty sure he did anyway.
And he goes, I'm like, oh,
He was just looking for another reason.
Yeah, it was very funny.
So, all the advice you gave him, and you neglected to give him the most important piece of advice.
Never marry a stripper?
No, that's.
Don't get a DUI. Don't go and buy a car without your squad leader.
2nd Battalion. 2nd Battalion.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into it.
It wasn't my choice. It wasn't my choice.
I mean, what I tell you,
The lifestyle chooses you.
I will tell you this: that I was when I went through RIP in I think our class picked up right after a block Christmas leave.
I remember you telling me back in your day, they had battalion level RIP.
They did. So we were in probably, I don't know, it couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 total RIP classes, regimental RIP classes have been conducted. So when we got up to Fort Lewis, they were like, you didn't go through RIP.
This is
I mean, that was part of when you got up there as a young dude.
So RIP is Ranger Indoctrination Program.
Yes.
I don't think it exists anymore.
Now it's called RASP.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much better, I mean, they, like everything evolves, and, you know, they have a much better product now.
Yeah.
You know, they're assessing, selecting, and they're training guys.
They get lots more training.
Then it was just a smoke session with no training at all.
It really was.
Yeah.
It was just to see if you would quit and if you could do the metrics. I don't remember a lot about it, to be completely honest with you.
I don't either.
I remember it sucked a lot, but that's about all I remember. Murph, it was a small army, and obviously in like Ranger Regiment, And any of those units, they are very small, so you kind of run into guys over and over again at different sort of stages, so it's very interesting.
We have some questions that we should get to real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So first off, thank you, everybody. Also, we have a Christmas gift for you. We are now on iTunes. You can find us under the Team House on iTunes. Our podcast it's there.
Well, we get asked just about iTunes just about every day, so.
Well, it's the number one. Okay, let's go to Andrew's big $20. Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you, everybody. In Emil's opinion, which foreign sniper rifle would he use if he had to go into an elite international sniper competition to defend America's honor when en route his rifle was purloined by a cheating foreign nationals team?
This sounds super specific.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've gotten a chance to use a multitude of these rifles, but the British rifle is a great rifle. The AI rifles are great. Action International.
That's the British rifle.
It's a good platform, yes. And and depending on caliber, the larger caliber rifles like the Canadian rifle, they use a Prairie Gun Works, or at least they did. A 338 Lapua Prairie Gun Works PGW. It's a Canadian company. It's a fantastic rifle too. Our current, or the rifle that just got selected for SOCOM, the advanced sniper rifle, is made by Barrett, the MRAD, which is a bolt action rifle. It's if you hear Barrett, people immediately think of
50 cal.
50 cal,
Or the bullpup.
M82 or whatever. It's just a giant clunky thing that's not particularly accurate. But these MRADs are very good rifles, and they're extremely accurate.
Yeah,
they're well made.
And what caliber? What do they shoot?
So the rifle that got selected for SOCOM, it'll be the Mark 22. Is the nomenclature that's been given it, and it's a change barrel system. So the rifle will come with, and I'm not giving anything away that's not open source. There's a 338 Norma Magnum, which is an anti-material round.
So does that replace the 50 cal as the anti-material round?
No, not really. Nothing can. The thing about 50 caliber, which I think it will probably stick around for a bit, is because of the size of the cartridge, you can do a lot with the bullet construction. So you can have multi-purpose rounds.
Incendiary.
You can have the
Raufoos rounds.
Yeah, the Raufoos, which actually is made by the company I work for.
What do they cost? Like $25 a pop or something?
I'm not sure. Street price is probably something like that.
Yeah.
But that is a explosive, armor-piercing, incendiary fragmentation round in a 50 caliber. So when you start scaling down the size of the projectile, there's only so much engineers can do with that. So 338, you can have a great armor-piercing round. You can have an API round, which is decent with it. But you're not going to get any of the multi-purpose sort of aspects.
And API is armor-piercing incendiary.
Right. So it'll come with a 338 Norma. It'll come with a 300 Norma, which is going to be the primary sort of anti-personnel barrel. And that 300 Norma is a very high-performance cartridge. It shoots a 215 grain bullet at close to 3,000 feet per second. So if you want to compare it to like where a 7.62, the drop out to 1,000 meters versus like a 300 Norma drop out to 1,000 meters, the bullet is dropping, I don't know, I'm probably just swagging this here, but it's probably dropping at 1,000 meters, probably about 2 meters less.
It's like a nail gun.
So what that does is that increases the hit probability.
Right.
And that's what whenever you make a new weapon system, you're always trying to increase hit probability out to a range, right? So, a M110 or the 7.62 semi-automatic sniper rifle that's currently in use, out to say 600 meters, you have probably about a 90% hit probability. And you go out to 800 meters and that probability goes down. And you go out to 1,000 meters, it goes down even more. So all these weapon systems are trying to extend that high 80 to 90% hit probability as far out as you can go.
Now, is that mostly due to the drop in like the velocity or the drop in performance at the end, or is it mostly due to the arc and your hit percentage, like the flatter around, the better your chance at hitting?
So it's both.
Okay.
So if you want to talk about trajectory and that part, that's kind of, that danger space is the term that we use.
Yeah.
So
I forgot.
You have kind of a rising branch and a falling branch of danger space. And what danger space means is if I have my sight setting set for, say 600 meters, because of the drop of the round, the trajectory of that bullet, that means that I might be able to hit within whatever aiming portion I'm looking at. So hunters, you look at for, it's however many inches is where you can hit an animal and, be able to hit, harvest the animal. And in military terms, it's usually, from, if you're aiming center mass, it's up to here and like down to the crotch or whatever. Mm-hmm. So with a 300 Norma, like I might be able to hit everything from like 350 meters out to like 650, 700 meters just by holding center mass. Mm-hmm. But with a 308, I might be able to only hit to about 550 meters, maybe like 610 meters. So the length, now those numbers are absolute, I'm just pulling them out of my ass, literally. So, but the how big your danger space is a factor of how ballistically effective the cartridge is. And also that will coincide with velocity and the bullet's performance, how less the wind drifts in the wind.
Right.
Or how much it drifts in the wind, I should say.
Fascinating.
There was another question, Dave, from Alex Bennett. He had actually, he said he's VA's cousin, had a question about.
We actually have 4 questions. So Alex, all right.
Alex, he says, hi from VA's cousin. I actually don't know who this dude is, but he said, what's your favorite story about Jared Van Alice? Because you guys were tight, you guys were friends, as you talked about, for a long time. He was my platoon sergeant twice, which I've talked about in the past. I mean, it's just like too funny how all that came about. But we kind of had VA in common. But you knew him much better than I did on a personal level.
My favorite Jared Van Alice story was... So he lived with me and my wife for almost a year before they bought their house in Columbus, and when his wife was pregnant. So they were Jared was deployed, and so Katie was staying with us, and so we would kind of carpool into work every once in a while, right? So I think his car was in the shop or something like that. So at the time he was working at sniper school. So he left regiment to go take over NCOIC of the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning. He did that while he was training up to go to selection. And he completely reinvented that program from where it was to when he got there to when he left. It was a completely different program that really, it really reflected current stuff that was going on because he had just come back from doing all that stuff. So anyway, we're in the car and we're leaving Fort Benning out towards the main gate. And a car comes on the on-ramp, so this guy's coming in from like Kelly Hill, like 3rd ID out there, and he like swerves right in front of us, right? And like, so I think Jared was driving, and so it's like a road ragey thing starts happening. And I'm like, dude, we're on base, we're on post, just relax. He's like, he's getting so mad. So, and Jared was one of these guys where he's probably the last guy you ever want to fight. Van Alst was like, he had a martial arts background. He was just naturally a gifted athlete. You did not want to fight him. He was one of the guys that when regiments started up their combatives program, Jared was one of the guys that would go and train with the Gracies, and he kind of brought the jiu-jitsu thing back to regiment and helped stand up the whole regimental program with the other guys that did it. So very, very capable guy, and like boxed and all this stuff.
Yeah,
so anyway,
you carried a karambit with him overseas.
Yeah. So not the guy, right? So anyway, we're doing the thing. So like, so this guy's next to us, and everyone's flipping each other off. I'm like, can we just get off post? I just right? I'm not a great fighter, so I'm like, okay, so like I don't really want to be the guy to get punched in the face while you're beating that other guy up. The other guy beats me up. So anyway, they kind of do by mutual hand signals that pull over thing, pull over. So Jared pulls over, this guy pulls over. And Jared reaches over in the glove compartment, opens the glove compartment, and pulls out a mouthpiece. And I'm like, you carry a mouthpiece? He's like, you never know. And he gets out of the car, puts the mouthpiece in, and starts walking towards the guy's car. And that guy, like, watched him, like, put the mouthpiece in, like, starts, like, stretching out, and the guy pulled away. He probably made a wise choice. That's my favorite Jared story.
Oh, man. That's awesome.
Don't fight a guy who has cauliflower ears, who carries his own
mouthpiece.
That's probably good advice.
Let's see here. From Andrew Dunbar, does the Army Marksmanship Unit have a biathlon program? Like, are they training an American Simo Hayat? Hayat? Did I say that?
They're talking about the Finnish sniper.
So biathlon is a winter Olympic sport. So the Army Marksmanship Unit trains the summer Olympic precision sports. So that's like air rifle. There's some pistol events, the Olympic shotgun events, the small bore rifle events. Now, the U.S. biathlon team, their shooters come down to Fort Benning, and the gunsmiths at AMU did all the work on their rifles and helped support them. Biathlon is a very interesting thing. So I got to meet the U.S. biathlon coaches like years ago, and they're always kind of recruiting. And the guy goes, "Hey, so do you ski?" And I'm like, well, I can ski. I mean, I did like the mandatory learn how to cross country ski in the Army thing, when we went to like Muck Creek up in Washington. And he's like, okay, forget it. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can use like, it doesn't matter. So he's like, listen, I'll put it to you this way. You can take a guy that's a world-class skier, like Olympic level skier. So if the guy doesn't make the Olympic team, but he's still in the top like 30 guys. Mm-hmm. And the best shooter in the world, and say that guy has never shot a rifle before, never even picked up a rifle. And the best shooter in the world that knows how to put on cross-country skis and like go. And that guy missing every target will beat you by 2 hours. Something like that. Because it's an unbelievably physically demanding sport, and it's more skiing than it is shooting. So the guys that win are the guys that shoot okay or shoot good, and they're world-class skiers.
So you could take a world-class skier and train them up to the standard they need quicker than you could take a world-class shooter and train them.
I don't think you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what the people they recruit for biathlon are the guys that aren't making like the national team for cross-country skiing, and they'll peel those dudes off because they're still like crazy good skiers. Right. I mean, all you have to do is like watch the biathlon. Every single one of those guys, when they cross, and they're like as fit as marathoners, they all throw up.
Yeah. So
who
trains their shooting program then?
So
is there not the focus on that?
They train it a different way because it's very interesting. For sort of static, the traditional precision events like the Olympics have, and that my team did in the AMU. You're trying to stand still. You're trying to bring your heart rate down and do all these things. You're the leaf floating down the stream. All this other crap. And in biathlon, like they just got done skiing however many kilometers.
They're not bringing the heart rate down.
So when they train, they elevate their heart rate before they do any kind of shooting training.
So it's all stress.
Right. So what, from my understanding, is they'll be on a treadmill and they'll run at a treadmill. They'll get their heart rate up to where they're normally at, like 170 beats a minute when they're coming off of a skiing thing, and then that's when they'll jump down and they'll train. So they
stress shoot.
Right. They'll try to figure out like my heart rate slows down, or I have this like a dip in my movement, and that's when I have to shoot. So it's all of a timing thing. Because if you watch them shoot in like on TV in the Olympics or whatever, if you can see that if the guy's in his rhythm, he's like picking. It's like right.
So they're really.
It's a meter. It's a cadence. Yeah. And if the guy misses, or if he holds beyond where he's supposed to shoot, he's screwed. You'll see him miss like all the targets.
Okay.
So either they get it or they don't. And like Simo Hayat was a Finnish sniper that killed 400 to 500 Russians during the Winter War from like 1939, 1940. And, he was like, this, a woodchuck, he was kind of a farmer, hunter dude. And he actually killed a lot of the guys with like a submachine gun type of thing. And he refused to use optics. They wanted to give him a rifle they captured from the Russians with a scope. He used a Mosin Nagant type of rifle. Yeah. And he thought that an optic would give his position away. He killed all those guys from relatively close range.
Okay.
Like maybe 100 to like 300 meters. And the Russians they had to take out almost an entire grid score with artillery just to take him out. He survived the war. If you look at pictures of him, his whole head looks sideways because his whole face was like shattered. I think he got shot in the face or shrapnel or whatever in his face. But he's a Finnish hero. There's
a great movie. I think I mentioned it on another episode we did. It's called The Winter War. It's a Finnish movie about that. I mean, it's pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, that's as an aside. It's like not the rabbit hole tonight, maybe, but that's a great conflict to study because they didn't have a lot of technology, but what they did have was they had a pretty highly trained group of guys. They had knowledge of the terrain. They could operate in the winter, and they're fighting an army of conscripts.
And it was a very small country going up against the Russian bear.
Now they ended up losing the war,
but they held out for a long time.
It was pretty painful to the Russians
because it was before World War II had really kicked off. So they were like on their own. They were fucked, I think, and everyone knew they were going to lose, but.
Right, so they still have a pretty good. They have a very good. I deal with Finland a lot because my company is from over there, so it's it's still a very big part of their cultural identity is SEMO. He's a battle.
That's awesome. Andrew, on that note, with the biathlon, Andrew wanted to know if you ever had the opportunity to work with the Olympic team, and if so, what was that like?
So at the Army Marksmanship Unit, we had many soldiers that represented the Olympics, represented the United States in the Olympics. So,
really?
Yeah, on a normal quadrennial, we would have anywhere between 3 or sometimes many as 5 or 6 soldiers shoot in the Olympics, and that's really why the Army Marksmanship Unit was formed. Was by executive order by President Eisenhower in 1956.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so prior to that. The Soviet bloc, the Eastern Bloc countries were winning all the Olympic medals because for propaganda, just like with chess, the Soviet Union used all the sports as a way to basically express the dominance of communism and of their system over the decadent West, right, the degenerate West. So they had
dogs for imperialism.
So just like the Soviet hockey team, like the 1980 Olympics, these were all professional players. But because of the way that they were actually in the Russian army, so they weren't actual professionals by the letter of the law, so that's why the Russian hockey team was so good. Well, the shooting team was the same way. They had officers and soldiers that their job was to be shooters, and they were killing everybody. And again, during the Cold War, like this was a major, thing that kind of.
It's like the same stuff that's come out about their skiing team, their Olympic weightlifting team.
So they're trying to, we're trying to close the gap so we can, get some notoriety of our own. So President Eisenhower said, look, what do we have to do to fix this? And so they formed an Army unit of professional shooters. And as soon as they formed it, the U.S. started dominating Olympic shooting. So all through the 1960s and into the 1970s, U.S. shooters dominated Olympic shooting competition. I think the number of Olympic medals that AMU shooters have won is up around 30.
Wow.
So that's a sergeant in the Army who shoots skeet.
Yeah.
And goes and shoots in the Olympics. So he has to go through all the same things to make an Olympic team. He's shooting at civilians that's what they want to do too.
Right.
So I worked shoulder to shoulder with Olympians all the time.
Yeah.
And so I would say what's that like is that when it starts talking about Olympic preparation and selection, only 2 people can go from any event to the Olympics from any country. So if you are the baddest ass, shotgun skeet shooter or trap shooter or 3-position small bore shooter, you're fighting for one of 2 slots against your own teammates.
Right.
In the AMU, there's 10 or 12 guys on one section. Only 2 of those guys can go to the Olympics, and you're also competing against the civilians.
And when you get to that level, like the difference between those shooters is what?
It's mental, is what it is,
Yeah.
really, and it's really who has a good day and who doesn't have a good day. So the biggest thing about Olympic shooting, and any of those types of like skill events, the Olympics, is timing when your performance. So your best performance is on the day when you need it.
Yeah.
So this periodization of training. So your training intensity, which you do sort of the same thing for like physical fitness. Like if you're training up for an event, for a marathon or whatever, you kind of run a certain way, a certain amount of miles, certain frequency, in order to get to where on game day you have your best run. Shooting is the same way, except that it's mainly all mental. So you don't want to hit like tracer burnout on your performance and your ability to focus. So that's where the coaching aspect of it comes into, where you're working mental management programs with guys. You're trying to coax the best performance out of a guy as possible. So they're all so good, and usually it's about who had the best day, who makes team. And then the Olympics is such a short match. Guys shoot a World Cup and it might take a whole week for them to shoot. Olympics is like one day.
Yeah.
And you're done.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it can be anything, like you're shooting somewhere in Asia and you're from the East Coast of the United States.
You're not acclimated.
Your circadian rhythms are all wrong. So lots, like we had guys come in from NASA and talk about sleep studies that they've done with astronauts of how to get best performance out of shooters based on how much sleep they have and like optimum sleeping conditions and how to do all that stuff, and nutritionists and how to like manage guys like blood sugar, how to manage your mental state. It's a whole thing. When you get to that level, it's everything.
So they brief on like VA strategy of like smoking a Cohiba cigar out at the range before shooting.
I mean, that can work. I mean, it's so there.
If it's part of a ritual, right? If it's part of an established.
That's true.
And also, yeah, I mean, when people talk to me about shooting competitions and what should I do to get ready for a shooting competition, I'll tell them, don't do anything that you don't normally do. So if you're a guy who gets up in the morning and drinks like 2 cups of coffee, and you're on the way to a shooting match, get up and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Like, because if you don't,
it's going to change.
It's going to, because if I drink a couple of cups of coffee a day, and if I don't have coffee, I start feeling it at, midday or whatever. And so, like, I need to have a cup of coffee. I haven't had caffeine. Same thing with diet and things like that.
So I need to have at least a couple beers a night just to keep me regular. And
so they've done studies to where the Russians experimented with this in like the 50s and 60s. Of course they did.
Of course.
Where very, very small amounts of alcohol can actually improve some of the things that you do with shooting. I'm talking like milliliters. So they would actually administer some alcohol, because there's a whole list of banned substances, and like alcohol wasn't one of the banned substances. So they experimented with like very small amounts of like vodka or whatever it was to try to get a guy to calm down or whatever. They even went so far as to experiment with like having guys get into fights before they had to shoot. So there's a story, it might be apocryphal.
So the adrenaline was like expended?
Exactly. It might be like, this might be an apocryphal story. But the way it goes is like in the late 50s, early 60s, the Russians would go and they would pick a fight with somebody, like maybe the best shooter on the U.S. team. They just start needling the guy, needling him. And then to get the U.S. shooter to blow up, and then the Russian shooter would like go over the top and scream and rant and rave, "I'm going to kill you, blah, blah." And everybody like, what's that guy's problem? And if you've ever been like in a fight, on the downside of that adrenaline, you're just like washed out emotionally and everything. And that's where then the guy would go up and shoot, and he's already washed out emotionally. And the thing that gets shooters in competition that makes them nervous is, like, sometimes you're shooting and you're doing better than you have before, and all of a sudden you get like adrenalized, and you're like, oh man, I could do it. And at that point, you get adrenaline physiologically. Now you're like riding the lightning, and you're trying to like pull it back, trying to calm yourself back down. It's really hard. So they actually made rules about like you couldn't go, like if you were caught like antagonizing somebody or whatever, you'd get like dismissed, because
that's like so bizarre.
It's sort of like masturbating before a first date in order to alleviate,
don't know what that loaded gun.
alleviate that tension, right?
I guess.
I like that analogy.
Things I've heard.
I'm not arguing.
Things I've
I'm not
heard.
arguing the point.
And then Andrew, okay, DJ asked, selling that capability, especially in conventional battalions, is crucial. Selling that capability. I guess what he was asking about the capability of like long range shooting in battalions, or competition style shooting. Not the usual training, especially in mech, but for surveillance skills, it's priceless. And observation skills and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say, even though my background is the competitive NRA position style shooting, and what you see a lot of guys doing, probably the best training on a competition side that an operational sniper can do is the precision rifle style shooting, which is extremely popular now. So PRS, or there's like National Rifle League, PRS, but essentially what it is they're bolt action rifles. Target size is fairly small. It's 2 minutes of angle and less. Lots of these matches, the target size is about 1 minute of angle. So that means that if you're shooting at a target at 500 yards, it's a 5-inch wide plate.
Yeah.
Small target. And, guys are shooting, all kinds of hot rod calibers that are extremely ballistically efficient. And, most of these stages are not on your belly with bipods with a sandsock. You might be shooting off of a barricade. You might have to climb up to like a rooftop type of obstacle. Some of them, like you get on like a swaying like sidewalk. Some of them involve like physical duress. Like you have to run up to the stage, so you already kind of smoke, your heart rate's elevated. So it rewards fitness. It rewards the ability to be sort of nimble. It rewards you being able to shoot from unconventional positions. That's, to me, the best training for a guy. And you're also dealing with wind. Because the small size of the targets, so you have to make a quick wind call and figure out, what am I going to do? Am I going to hold the right edge, the wind's coming out of the right? Am I holding the target right? Am I going to click the knob on my scope and hold center? You have to make all these sort of tactical decisions. And you have to kind of make strategic decisions. You're waiting to shoot, you're watching conditions, you're looking at the other shooters, you're talking to how the guys are shooting, you're watching them. So you're wargaming stages. And that's a great training tool, because it keeps you sort of like, mentally nimble. So that style of shooting is great. And there is a tactical element of it. You see the dudes running around with like, $900 cry pants and full of Velcro and stuff like that. So, but those rifles are extremely accurate. Guys are loading their own ammunition. They're measuring their powder to within a kernel of powder. Crazy shit.
Wow.
And that's a fantastic way of training. And lots of military guys are good, especially in the soft community. I mean, I probably know 24 guys that they do that on the weekends.
I want to grind through some the last couple questions because we have some other big topics I wanted to get into, actually, that you had suggested that are really good. But Andrew wanted to know, the people who are in the President's 100 tab walk around like they're hot stuff. Or are they kind of treated like the kid who wins the science fair?
So the President's 100 tab is a marksmanship award. Every year at the national championships, there's a pistol match and a rifle match. And it's stages of fire. Pistol has their stages, rifle has their stages. And it's a traditional kind of course of fire. And the top 100 shooters at the end of the match are awarded the President's 100 award. Now in the Army, we can wear it as a tab.
The longest tab.
Right, so it used to be that was the top tab because it went by the length of the tab.
Yeah.
So if a guy in Special Forces tab was President's 100 Special Forces and Ranger tab, and then the last revision to AR 670-1 changed it.
The uniform regulations.
Yes, that's the regulation of how you're supposed to wear a uniform.
Yeah.
Your sideburns are 1/millionth.
670-fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Your sideburns are 1/millionth of an inch too long.
Right.
Your mustache isn't tapered down. It doesn't look enough like the guy from the Addams Family.
Freddie Mercury.
Right. So I think the President's 100 tab is now the lowest tab.
Really?
Yeah, so I was Ranger qualified and I had a President's 100 tab, so I wore my Ranger tab and my President's 100 tab underneath. It looks dumb.
It's weird.
It's really
aesthetically
it's so
the haters, yeah.
Here's my thing. So anyway, at the AMU, if you didn't earn your president's 100 tab within about 2 years or 3 years of being on the team, you probably weren't doing your job.
Yeah.
So in my job, in my unit, it was a common thing, and it was more like if you didn't have it, like, dude, why don't you have it yet? Now, and in other environments, I don't know, I can't speak to that. It is a very prestigious award,
Right.
because they only give out 100 a year. And I know on the rifle side, there's about 1,400 competitors that go out for it every year.
Wow.
And of those competitors, most of them have already gotten the award before, so I think they give out about 15 to 20 new ones a year.
Really?
That's it, yeah.
Wow.
So the other like 75 guys
I always assumed it was like 100
have
dudes.
have earned it before. So you're just not out of the mix if you have. It's like
You don't get mustard stain or stars.
no.
Yeah.
So when I was when I was in the Army and I was shooting, I would have a guy who's like, man, so like this sucks. You're shooting and like you already have it. I'm like, yeah, my job is to keep you out, dude.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
Gatekeeper.
make you earn it.
And
right?
thank God Ranger Battalion was
Keeper of the
like
tab.
that.
Well, yeah, thank God.
Thank God, yeah.
Yeah, thank God none of us did that respectful.
Andrew, I think when I was in the Army, I probably saw one person with a President's 100 tab, and I don't think they walked around like they were hot shit. Because after a while,
it's actually a pain in the ass because you have to explain it constantly.
Yeah, and you have.
Do you have like people coming up trying to make uniform corrections? Like, hey there, Sergeant.
So I would actually start making up stories about it. So a guy like President's 100 tab. What's that? Like, were you like a tomb guard? I'm like, actually, what it is they take the top 2 bodyguards, and we have 2 in each state. So I'm part of the Georgia guys. So we have 2 in each state. So we're the President's 100. So when the President comes to the state for like a campaign event, they would bring us out to help guard him.
That's awesome.
Guys are like, really? Like, yeah. So like, you have to stay on top of it,
Yeah.
to maintain all your brevity codes and whatnot.
But I also don't think that anybody looked at him like the kid who won the science. Like, I mean, in any organization, especially once you get into like the tiered units where people have badges or tabs or anything else like that, there's always a certain amount of envy.
Tab envy,
badge envy. Like,
sure.
You see somebody with a Pathfinder badge, or President's 100, or you see something with somebody, or you see somebody with something you don't have, and you're like, I get that.
Yeah, that's the thing the Marines always would say to the Army guys, like, you guys have patches for everything, everyone's just a Marine. And actually, it's not a bad perspective,
right?
Honestly, because you do the whole sniff test that Army guys do all the time.
Yeah. Looking at your shoulder.
Yeah, the very first thing I'd come in, like, scoot around and see if you have a tab, and like scoot around like your right shoulder, see if you have a combat patch. Yeah, that's something that we definitely do in the Army, and it's probably not a great thing, but that's the way we do it.
Yeah. I was never close enough. That was like a whole other stratosphere. The only guys I ever knew that had it were you guys.
Right.
So it was never really a thing I just wanted to get my Ranger tab so I don't get smoked anymore.
You finally get a seat at the back of the deuce and a half. That's why I wanted to get it.
And it depends on where you're at too, because like in Ranger Battalion, having a Ranger tab, nobody cares. Like,
so that's the great analogy. So having a Ranger tab in Ranger Battalion is like having a President's 100 tab in AMU.
Right.
Like if you didn't have it, you're like,
what's up with that?
Yeah. I mean, you're not. Why are you there?
But it is hard to get because it's one match. It's not a lot of bullets, and if you make one mistake, you have to wait a year for the next opportunity.
It's like the grenade toss at the EID.
It's EID.
it's the grenade toss.
It's headspace and timing on the 50 cal, which is what got me on the EID.
Ian asks, in the faster paced environments these days, do you pre-build a range card or just estimate range rapidly?
So good question. It depends on like how, like if I'm in the competitive world, right? For like a match, you're going to want to build that range card before you go out there. Now there's some ways of dealing. Now some both if we're talking about like a military environment, there's ways of training so that you can deal with targets at unknown ranges quickly, and you don't have to do a lot of calculations. There are some drills that you can do based on the optics that are on sniper rifles that, hey, if this to this fits within my crosshair from here to here, then I know that I can hold here in the crosshair and hit the target.
Guaranteed it, yeah.
Right? So you can have some of those things, but those tend to really run out of gas at around 600-700 meters. Past that, you really need to know what the solution is. So what most of the big kids do, at least in the competitive world, is they build a range card beforehand. With range cards, what I would do is, and especially like some of this extreme long range shooting that I've done, like out to 2 miles, I would have the elevation setting I needed to shoot with the rifle, whether it was what I was going to hold in the reticle, what I was going to dial on the scope. I would have some wind notes. So what was the wind? How much did the bullet drift in the wind at, say, 1 mile an hour, 4 mile an hour, 8 mile an hour? Some of the modern scopes have dots in the reticle, and the dots represent wind holes in miles per hour.
Oh, you mean like the SVD scope that has like that grid in it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the modern scopes have they have wind dots. So they're time of flight dots is what they are, and it's out there. Guys can look at it and find out how it works. But essentially, once you know your bullet's performance, that dot might represent a 4 mile per hour wind. So if I'm holding in the reticle for elevation, I can put this dot next to where I'm holding on the line. If my hold is 4 mils, so at the 4 mil line, that first dot might be 4 miles an hour of wind. So I might write down target size, how wide the target is in miles per hour of wind. I would definitely write down my cheat sheet of elevations, and I might write down what I think the wind is going to be doing and how much it's going to be blowing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I was raised as a assistant gunner and a machine gunner. So that whole concept of like almost doing like a range card beforehand, it's very valuable.
Yeah.
And it's really effective.
And I mean, I haven't operated in any kind of capacity as a sniper for like a decade now. So I'm not familiar with any of the new optics, with any new systems, but generally, like in an urban environment, you're taking snap. If you're set up in an OP, yeah, you might do a range card. But generally, if you're like on a not support by fire line, but if you're in an Overwatch or whatever,
right.
All your shots are going to be close enough that they can be snapshots anyway.
Exactly.
And if you're set up where you need the range and you need to know the ranges, generally you're going to have the time to set up a range card because you're really not talking about snapshots.
Nowadays, we have laser rangefinders.
Right, and there's ways of mitigating that too, like, if I can dial, and this is what was old is now new again. So when I first started like doing this sort of military marksmanship type of thing, the sniper stuff, some of the optics guys would dial a 300 meter zero, or you dial a 500 yard zero, and you would use body holds. Right?
Yeah.
You can still use some of those techniques. So if you're at a position and you have to deal, you think I'm only dealing with targets at to say 500 or 600, I might put a 300 meter zero on the rifle and know where to hold at these other distances. Again, and the more danger space you have, because the ballistic effectiveness of your cartridge, the more you can get away with, which again drives like why guys 7.62 308 Winchester as a sniper caliber is going away completely within SOCOM.
So talk a little bit about what a 300 meter zero is, what a 500 meter zero is, and like why that's important.
Well, the concept of zeroing means that you're basically co-witnessing the strike of the round to your point of aim. So if I have a 300 meter zero, that means that like the center of my crosshair or the tip of my front sight post, that the bullet is going to hit exactly where my sights are pointed at that range. So in sniping stuff and like precision rifle stuff, you're shooting anywhere from like 100 out to say 11, 12, 1300 yards or meters. So you have to make adjustments to that. So if I have a 100 meter zero, which is kind of standard in the precision rifle world, 100 yard, 100 meter. If you're working in yards, you have 100 yard zero. Working in meters, 100 meter zero. And that's my baseline. And I know either through experience of going out and shooting and gathering data, or if I'm using a ballistic solver, an electronic format, whether it's on a wind meter that has ballistic stuff in it, or on my phone, I've probably got 5 or 6 different ballistic solvers
I have never used
that
one
you
or
can
used one.
download
That's
on
amazing.
iTunes, and you type in ballistics on iTunes, and you see all the ones that come up.
Right after you
there's
type in the
dozens.
team house. Anyway, go
All
ahead.
right.
There's dozens of them.
Well, we'll get back to some questions in a few, but there were some other topics you had brought up, Emil, that I didn't want to let fall by the wayside. One of them you touched on a couple times already is the current state of special operations sniping, and where is that at? I guess there's a lot of different angles to come at that from, but
Sure.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about maybe the way to talk about it is the way it's evolved over the last 10 or 20
Sure.
years, and kind of where we're at now, and maybe project where it's going in the future.
So I would say up until even the late 90s, the evolution of sniper stuff, technology-wise, training-wise, is very static, almost the same as like from Vietnam. It
Yeah.
really didn't change much.
Yeah.
I mean, we got some different weapon systems. You had an M24, but M24 had a mill reticle and had minute of angle
Right.
adjustments. The elevation was 1 minute of angle clicks, and the windage was half minute of angle clicks, and the reticle was mils. Like, did that make sense to anybody? But it was like that for 20 years, right? How guys trained, and so back in the 90s or in the 80s or in the 70s, if you were a sniper, what you did was, again, your primary job is you have to engage a target at an unknown distance. So target pops up, how far away is that target? Well, how do I do that? Well, I have to figure out how far away it is I can interrogate it with a device. I can use a mill relation formula, so that's basically how big the target is in my scope, my reticle, and I can apply a mathematical formula if I know how big the target is, and that'll give me the range of the target. Now that I have the range of the target, how do I hit the target? So back in the old days, like the way sniper school was conducted for 20 years is you'd get a guy, you start at 100 meters, and you'd zero. And when you're zeroed, you take the little screw out of your scope cap and you set that to zero, 100 meter, boom. And then you go and you shoot 150 meters and you record, okay, I need like 1 + 1 click at 150 meters, you write it down.
Yeah.
And you go all the way back, every 50, all the way back to like 750 meters, I need the 700 meter setting on my scope plus like 3 clicks, whatever. You had all that crap written down.
in your dope book.
Yeah.
In your dope book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody carry around these big dope books and
Yeah.
everything, right? So the big change happened when the ability to predict trajectories with electronics came about. So first ballistic solvers were these things called ATRAGs. And it was kind of a pretty large, it was like a giant Palm Pilot.
Like the mortar ballistic computer.
Well, it was like a Palm Pilot, and it had ballistic software like on a flash drive or in it. And the way it worked was, you shot 100 meter zero, and then in conditions, and then you typed into the solver all the info on your rifle. So how fast the bullet is going, what bullet I'm shooting. So you had to input a ballistic coefficient of the bullet, the height above the bore, all this stuff. And then when you were shooting at your target, you had to input the current atmospheric data. Because that's one thing with ballistics, exterior ballistics. So there's 3 types of ballistics. You have internal, exterior, and terminal ballistics. So internal is kind of everything happens inside of a rifle, from when the firing pin strikes the firing pin. So that's the gas pressure, the shape of the bullet, design of the chamber, design of the barrel, the twist rate, all this stuff. Exterior ballistics, everything that happens to that bullet when it leaves the barrel to its time in flight till it hits the target. And terminal ballistics is what happens to that bullet when it hits the target, it comes around. So it's like glass shooting, and what happens, like the hunting bullet, how well does it do when it hits a deer or a person, or how well it does in ballistic gel, all these things. So the solvers would solve predictions based on equations and algorithms with all this atmospheric data. You say, okay, it's 75 degrees, 1,000 feet above sea level, humidity is like 25%, blah, blah, blah. You put all this stuff in, and then the solver would go, if your target's 750 meters, you need to hold 5.1 mils, or you need to hold 17 minutes of elevation. That was like that was a huge sea change. That was the lightning bolt, like evolutionary quantum leap in
because
technology.
otherwise you would have to spend like ungodly amounts of time to collect all of that data.
And the thing about collecting data, the weak point of collecting data, is that you've collected it, right, you've collected it at that one time and place. And unless you can predict how that trajectory changes, so at Fort Benning, Georgia, at our range, elevation was about 300 feet above sea level. So if I get my data at 300 feet above sea level at 90 degrees and with 80% Fort Benning humidity, and I go and I'm in like the mountains of Afghanistan and it's 40 degrees or 30 degrees and I'm at 10,000 feet above sea level.
I remember when me and my sniper partner Joe got to Afghanistan from Benning, we had to come up a minute of angle.
Right, so like how do you predict that? So that was the biggest evolutionary thing. So, and then once the solver thing started, then the accuracy of the data. So how do we get this data more accurate? So then I would say the next biggest sort of thing that came through was this propagation of wind meters. So, wind meter or an anemometer, so you can hold this thing up and it'll tell you the velocity of the wind. Then they were able to put in the ballistic solver into the wind meter. So now the guy has one thing.
Oh, wow.
So you have a wind meter and it's got a ballistic solver, and these wind meters have atmospheric collection things on them. So now the meter can tell you it's how many degrees. It's this much. Right. This is the atmospheric pressure is 29.11. So now it does all the math for you. So once all that stuff was done, then the accuracy of the bullet data came into question. So we need to really truly understand how bullets acted in flight. So there was some work done on that. I would say the guy that did the most work on that is a guy named Brian Litz, who is a 100-pound brain dude. And he's a champion competitive shooter, and he decided that he wanted to start figuring this stuff out, instrument it, measure it. So all the way now, we've evolved
to turn it into a science.
It is a science now. So his company's Applied Ballistics. So now we are at a point where, so if a company comes out with a new bullet, Hornady or Sierra or Lapua or Berger comes out with a new bullet, they will shoot that bullet across Doppler radar that can measure time of flight data off of the base of that bullet, like maybe get 100 pings on that bullet out to like 1,500 meters.
Wow.
Or 2,000 meters.
Yeah.
And now, instead of making guesses at what the bullet's trajectory looks like, because, hey, we have a ballistic coefficient, which is an expression of the bullet's ability to penetrate the air, and ballistic coefficient is really
at a meter off the gun.
And the ballistic coefficient is a ratio between the sectional density of the bullet and the form factor of the bullet relative to a ballistic model. Now you have actual radar data, and they have the ability to take that radar data and put it in the solver. So now your solver knows the exact. All you have to now is input is like, my sights are this high over the bore, my muzzle velocity is X, what the current atmospherics are, and we're now pushing this first shot hit, this hit probability out now to, for real, if you have a cartridge that's capable of it, we're getting first round hits or close enough to the target where you're right on it, out to 3,500 yards and beyond.
So, Emil, let me just throw this out at you then. Some of the longest record sniper shots in the field.
Yeah.
JTF2 2017, 3,540 meters. Special Forces sniper with a Barrett in 2012, 2,815 meters. This looks like a British sniper with a AI L115A3, 2,475 meters. That was in 2009.
Right.
Is this why these guys were able to reach out to these lengths?
It's part of it. I think part of it is there's now calibers, there's now accurate sniper systems that are ballistically effective out to those ranges. So the Canadians are using 50 caliber, right? So they're using effectively a match grade 50 caliber. The Brits might be using 50 caliber, might be using .338 Lapua. These are cartridges that relatively new for sniping. 338 Lapua is a very effective cartridge. It shoots a 250 grain bullet at 2,950 feet per second.
Wow.
It's fast. I mean, if you think about how fast is 3,000 feet per second, 3,000 feet per second, how fast that is, that at 1,000 yards, in a vacuum where there's no air resistance, the bullet takes 1 second to go 1,000 yards. At 5/8 of a mile, the bullet travels in 1 second.
That's amazing.
Actual time of flight is about, depending on the cartridge, on velocity and the coefficient, but it's part of that, part of the prediction. And, it's been my experience that, optics have really come a long way too. So if you're missing, you can see it, right? You can see where you're missing. I mean, guys are using thermals, all kinds of extremely expensive equipment that was maybe designed for a reconnaissance role. Now snipers are using it because they can see where the bullets fall.
Yeah.
So yeah, all that stuff, I think, and training, right? So all those programs, the Canadian program, the British program, they have some of the best training in the world. They both those countries' militaries have a really long marksmanship lineage, and they take it seriously, for real.
With this data, so back in the old days, like 97 and whatnot, and before 2000. One of the things that was always drilled into our head was the cold bore. Is cold bore is it figured into, like, does it matter? Is it not as significant as we used to be led to believe?
So
is it fed into this stuff?
Not really. So I mean, cold bore means the very first shot you take out of the rifle, where does it hit?
Right.
I have found that cold bore more often than not, if it's not where, say, your 10th shot is usually a factor of you.
Okay.
And not the rifle and ammunition system.
So that is not something that's taken into consideration.
Well, it depends. It's, as we say, the out on everything when you're a military instructor is like, it's situationally dependent. MET-T, sorry. Right? So it depends on the situation. So if I know that every time I go out, my first shot is like 0.2 mils low, I have to factor that into my first shot. I have to hold 0.2 mils high in my first shot. And, if you're, the whole data collection thing, snipers still do that.
Right.
You should still be doing that.
Right.
If you're serious about your craft, whether you're a competitive shooter, civilian shooter, you're a hobbyist, you're a military sniper, you should be serious about your craft and document all that stuff. And see if but part of that too, that cold bore, it can change. So we know things now, and these solvers can do things like, as the temperature increases, the bullet usually leaves the barrel faster because the powder burns faster in a hotter environment. It's a chemistry thing, right? So the solvers now I can measure my velocity. So at, say, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, my velocity is 2,600 feet per second. And at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, my velocity is 2,650 feet per second. And at like 20 degrees Fahrenheit, my muzzle velocity is like 2,510 feet per second. For example, I can enter those data points into my solver. And then when the solver reads the temperature, it can adjust the prediction that it gives you based on the muzzle velocity it is assuming you're going to have because of that temperature.
Do the solvers have? I mean, do they figure for cold bore? Is that something?
I think some do. The ones that I use usually don't. So it's more of a, again, it's more of a thing that I know. Like I shot this 2-mile competition a couple years ago, and this one particular rifle, it was a mechanical thing. Whether it was like how it's set in the bedding of the rifle after the first shot, but the first shot was always like about a minute of angle high.
Okay.
Always.
Yeah.
So the very first shot, I aimed 1 minute of angle low, and afterwards I held center.
So for people who don't know what that is, a cold bore is the very first shot that you shoot in the day. And for a sniper, a lot of times that data is vital because you're not heating up your barrel or doing whatever, whatever they say, a colder barrel, maybe the round travels slower or whatever.
But yeah, then they say like a lot of these things are kind of obsolete with modern weapons.
Well,
right. Like we used to have like a breaking in period with guns.
Well, you still really do need to break in guns. Yeah, the higher the caliber is, the more, so some of these really high performance calibers like 6.5 Creedmoor, 300 Norma, they're now being used or will be used in military systems. You do experience where the velocity of the barrel will change until the barrel is seasoned, and that's a certain round number based on based on how the powder, the how it fouls, everything. So,
and does that term seasoned mean wear and tear on the lining of the barrel? Is that what it?
It's it's something that I still don't think they know exactly what it is. It could be. There's a couple different theories about it. One theory is you are changing the bore, the condition of the bore. So it's after it's first made, it might have some like little marks on it from tooling, and you shooting it smooths those tooling marks out. Another is just the fire and heat that comes out of a rifle cartridge. The temperature the temperature out of a fired round is actually higher than the melting point of steel.
Really?
So when you shoot a round out of your 308 or 300 Winchester Magnum, the temperature caused by the powder burning is greater than the melting point of steel. So you're eroding the steel in the chamber in the barrel every shot. So after a certain point, maybe it wears to a certain point and then the bullet is jumping a certain amount where it wasn't before, or maybe you're adding material to the bore because you're depositing carbon, or maybe you're eroding the lands and grooves to a point to where you're knocking the edges off of them and that changes velocity. Whatever the reason is, there is a net effect.
That's interesting.
There's a net effect. The velocity will typically, in most rifles, regardless of caliber, they'll typically speed up a bit from a brand new barrel that you just screw on, or just get the rifle, you buy it from, your local gunsmith or gun shop, and you take it out, and after 100 rounds, a lot of guys, or 200 rounds, guys will realize that their velocity is speeding up.
Does that have anything to do at all with like what type of stock you have? Whether you have like a floating stock or like is
now,
that the barrel settling?
It's more what's happening
more in the
inside the barrel. So that's an internal ballistics thing, and the thing that makes it really tough about internal ballistics is, we can see external ballistics, and we can see turbo ballistics.
You can't put a camera inside the chamber.
Right.
You can't. Now we can instrument chambers with pressure. That's one thing that industry that we do is you can measure pressure by a couple different ways of. You basically have a transducer somewhere in the chamber area, and when the rifle fires, that pressure can basically pushes on a piezo crystal that causes like
piezoelectric crystals.
It'll cause some voltage change, and then that voltage can be interpreted as pressure.
That's amazing.
So, and that's old technology.
Yeah.
We've been able to do that for decades and decades. But you can do all that. You can actually even see the pressure curve relative to where the bullet is in the barrel. So, you reach a peak pressure and then the pressure starts going back down. So we know where that peak pressure is relative to wherever it is in the bore, but you still can't see what that bullet actually looks like as it's engaging the lands and grooves in the rifle.
You can, it's just not healthy.
Yeah, you can do it like one time.
Right.
So your perspective on the modern state of special operations sniping, just to try to summarize. It's become much more of a science.
We went far afield.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. I love the sidebars.
Yeah, me too.
I love them. It's become much more of a science.
Yeah.
You've been able to take many more measurements than you were in the past and enter them into computation,
so prediction,
into a computer.
The ability to predict is much greater. The tools that the guys have to help with that prediction, so both solvers and wind meters. The caliber and the ammunition and the weapons platforms are much better. They're more precise. They're more ballistically effective than they were 20 years ago. And if you look at what's, again, going back to hit probability, what goes into hit probability? Well, everything stacks, right? So if I have a muzzle velocity of a certain amount, that error is stacked to my base precision of the rifle, and then that error is stacked onto what's my range? What is my range estimation? What's the word for it? How accurately can I define that? What kind of resolution do I have in that? So now there are range estimation tools that are in line with the rifle, with the gun platform.
Oh, really?
So mounted to the rifle is a range estimator, is a laser rangefinder. And some laser rangefinders mounted in line with the rifle also give a ballistic prediction. So now the things that I had to do with the Kestrel, if the system is all calibrated and zeroed correctly and everything else, that I can be on the target and I can press a button and I can see the data. It says the target's 921 meters away, and just below it, it can tell me what my data is to shoot it.
Wow. So it's all super data driven.
It's
much more so than back in our day.
It's all integrated, right?
Yeah.
It's integrated, and all those aspects of it. And I think the biggest change is the ability for guys to operate in limited visibility. So
the night vision and thermal systems.
Right. So the advancement of how, and you know how fast night vision changes. You can buy the hotness.
Yeah.
And in 2 years, it's obsolete.
Yeah. Now they have color night vision.
Yeah.
I mean, there's crazy shit.
So all that stuff, without getting too specific, but so that level of ability and the ability to illuminate the target, ability to see the target, and the ability to spot at night using different techniques and different equipment has just exploded. So that's probably the biggest change.
On that note, you said you'd like to talk also about the Advanced Sniper Rifle, the ASR program, and maybe that's great, and also into what's the future of sniping.
So this kind of talks about the future of like special operations sniper. So the ASR, the Advanced Sniper Rifle, again, this is all open source stuff, but this is a program that started probably 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's coming to fruition to where special operations guys are going to get a rifle with 2 calibers that have never been fielded before. And those calibers, these are straight up. It's a straight up target. It's a bullet that came out of the target shooting world. The specifications on this rifle are equivalent to what you would expect any match rifle to be able to shoot. Equivalent to the same standards, same expectation that I, as the head coach of the AMU, our gunsmiths would give me a brand new 1,000-yard rifle. How well I expected it to shoot, that's how well these rifles shoot.
But it has to be fielded in all the conditions that those guys up at Mishawaka have to put combat rifles through.
Right, and the biggest change is the ability to change calibers.
And what purpose does that serve?
So so the system is I think comes with about 3. It's kind of spec to come with 3 barrels, and 1 barrel is a training barrel, and then 1 barrel is an anti-personnel barrel. And then the other barrel is an anti-material barrel.
Okay.
So the anti-material barrel is a separate caliber with a separate projectile that has very, very good armor penetration ability. And the anti-personnel barrel is very high performance, but because it's so high performance, it's not really a rifle that you can go out and train every day for a month and shoot 10,000 rounds through it, because there's a trade-off. The higher performance that your cartridge is, usually the less barrel life you have.
Okay.
So the training barrel is designed so that a guy can still train all his core competencies. He can do the mechanical work of marksmanship. He can still train how to read the wind. Because the thing is, with these solvers that we have now, all you have to do is all you have to worry about is the wind speed. You don't have to memorize dope anymore. So when I train guys for long range shooting, I train them to try to always capture what the total wind speed is. Never mind, when I first started shooting competition shooting, one of these old timers at AMU, I was like, "Hey Sergeant, how much wind is blowing out there?" And he looks through his spot scope and he looks up the wind flags and takes some, grasp through his ears, like, "It's about 4 minutes." I'm like, "Well, why? Why is it 4 minutes of wind?" He goes, "Well, it just is." I'm like, "Well, how do you know?" He's like, "Well, it looks like it is. The Mirage is doing that, and you got that flag, and it's just 4 minutes, man. Just shoot in 4 minutes." And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't have like 20 years to learn how to do this shit.
Right.
I want to learn it like right now." So, and that's really the way that these solvers work. So I don't care what the bullet's performance is. As long as I can tell me as a human being what the wind speed is, what the direction is, and those two things together, the direction and the velocity, will give you the total crosswind of that's out there. Once I have the total crosswind, I can use my solver, I can use my reticle, I can just shoot a mile per hour of wind. So a big change in just the way people do it, whether it's the precision rifle shooting community or the military community, is guys communicating to each other in velocity of wind. Because if you and I are on the same position, and I have a 300 Winchester Magnum, and you have an M4 with a scope on it, right? And we're shooting, and I'm like, "Dave, how much wind are you using?" And you go, "Oh, I'm using like 4 mils of wind." That does me zero good.
Right.
I can do nothing with that information.
Right.
But if you go, "Emil, I'm using 6 miles an hour," it's 6 miles an hour for your rifle, it's 6 miles an hour for my rifle.
Right.
So inculcating that and training guys to think of wind speed as a total velocity number, and don't really worry about memorizing clicks or mils or any of that stuff, because your solver can tell you that, your little cheat sheet, your data card can tell you that, and there's all kinds of these shorthand rule of thumb formulas that have been developed that work pretty well. So, I can know that if I'm at a certain range with this system, I know that my wind is probably this for a certain mile an hour wind because of this sort of shorthanded sort of formula.
So this ASR project, is it designed to replace the 110, the Win Mag, the whatever anti-material?
No, it's designed to replace the M24. M24 is already replaced. It's designed to replace the 2010.
Okay.
So the XM 2010, which is 300 Winchester Magnum, ASR across SOCOM is designed to replace this rifle.
Gotcha. Why are they replacing the 300? Why did they decide they needed to do that?
So the 300 Winchester Magnum is a great cartridge. It's very ballistically effective. But, some of this stuff is chicken and the egg stuff, right? So you need to have a capability, but you can't actually make a system to have the capability unless you have a requirement. And you can't write a requirement unless you've proven you needed the capability. So what happened was, one of the big changes with the way the system was set up and designed was a bunch of operational guys within SOCOM got together and said, "Okay, this is what we think right looks like, and this is what we want as a system." The 300 Win Mag, it is pretty good out to 1,000 meters or maybe 1,100 meters, and actually beyond if the guy's capable. But it's all about what is the percentage of hit and extending that hit probability out as far as we can. So instead of like training a guy to be a Jared Van Alst or somebody else that's really, really good at reading wind or shooting, like I want to take my average guy and make him as effective as like a stud at that range. And the only way to do that with like long range shooting and sniping is to increase the ballistic performance of the cartridge.
You're going to compensate.
You're compensating.
Using the technology.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So, do you think modularity is going to be the future then of, I mean, this is a huge question, but maybe of marksmanship, maybe of military marksmanship, maybe of sniper operations? And I remember when the SCAR came around, really in 2009, I think we started messing around with it at my unit, and I thought it was like a revelation. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
But kind of fell by the wayside now. No one really gives a shit about the SCAR. I mean.
Yeah. This rifle is modular. I mean, you can change calibers within a few minutes. So that's a modular thing. And the buttstock closes like a lot of modern
But
ones.
I was thinking of the barrels changing out, the calibers.
Yeah, barrels changing out, calibers changing out. You no longer have to send. I mean, back in the old days with an M24, once that thing stopped shooting, you had to send it to Remington. So you turn the rifle into the armor, and the armor's like, "You're right, it sucks. I got to turn around. I got to send this thing to Remington." That's part of the military contract, right? Yeah, so the Marines, again, the Marines are ahead of the Army a lot in marksmanship, all through history. This current marksmanship training that's going on, the current revision of marksmanship for big Army marksmanship, a lot of that was heavily influenced by the Marine Corps, by Army guys going to Marine symposiums, going to see Marine training, and taking those lessons learned. The Marines do marksmanship great. I mean, then you're talking to a guy
especially from like boot camp.
Yeah,
from the very beginning.
I mean, you're talking to a guy that I shot competitively against the Marine Corps rifle team for over a decade, and my job was to like kick those guys in the dick.
Yeah.
Every time I was on the range, but they do marksmanship institutionally really well.
I'll tell you, like in Marine Corps boot camp, I can't remember if it was 2 weeks or 4 weeks, just snapping in every single day. Dry firing with the traditional sling
They've
positions.
evolved too. So they're no longer, the really static type of shooting. They've evolved their programs too to where, they have sort of dynamic tables that include moving targets now and shooting and moving and, all these lessons learned. And, there's super smart guys and they're doing the same thing that the Army's doing.
Those fundamentals like stay with me through everything just because of that period of snapping in.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the modularity bit is huge because, if I have a barrel that is shot out or not performing, the system comes with X amount of barrels, or I just have to put it on there. It takes the operator 2 minutes to do that. So, at a certain point, especially on a long deployment or something happens, you're jumping it and something goes wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And now you have a rifle that you can't shoot. It's a freaking tomato steak. You can change it out in the field. That's a huge thing.
That's amazing.
The other subject I wanted to get into before we take a few more questions that I think people will be really fascinated by is ultra long range marksmanship. You were talking about once you get pushing out past 1,500 meters, you're one of the guys out there really, aiming for 2 miles out.
Right.
Some of those record-setting shots in the field that I had mentioned earlier. We spent, I think, a lot of time talking about the frictions so far that snipers or long-range marksmen encounter, the wind, distance, i.e. gravity, atmospherics. What changes once you get into the ultra long range?
So that's a really good question. So precision shooting, you have kind of like, if you think about it, a couple different sort of settings on the gas pedal, right? So if I'm shooting out to say 600 meters, I know that I don't really have to resolve. I don't have to be like Emil Praslick, wind nerd. If I'm only shooting out to 600 meters, I know that depending on my caliber, I might just be able to hold the right edge of an IPSC.
I muscle it in.
Out to say 4 or 5 miles an hour wind with a 7.62. If I hold the right edge of an IPSC out to about 600 meters, I'm probably going to get a hit, whether it's anywhere on the edge depth to downwind. But the farther out that you go, we were talking earlier about so I consider an elite wind reader somebody that can get the direction of the wind within half an hour on a clock, which is 15 degrees, and the velocity of the wind within 1 mile per hour. That's elite level wind reading. Now, that level of confidence and granularity, I've had 2 beers in. That's not for me to say anymore. But that level of confidence isn't required if you're shooting on this side of 800 or even 1,000 meters. I mean, if your job is to get hits on target, getting the wind within 2 miles an hour of a total effect is probably okay. And if I'm at 500 meters and in, getting the wind within 4 miles an hour of the wind is probably okay to get hits. But if I start pushing out beyond the transonic range of that bullet, so velocities...
Supersonic, transonic, subsonic.
Right, so supersonic is anything above, well, it's technically anything above Mach 1, right? But if you remember sort of Chuck Yeager, going through all the vibrations and, all the test pilots that were killed, there's a zone between about Mach 0.8 to about Mach 1.2, which is very unstable. So the bullet goes through a lot of turbulence through that zone. So if you're shooting at or near that zone, your ballistic performance of your bullet starts degrading extremely fast.
Does it get a lot of wobble, or what happens to it?
Well, some bullets do, some bullets don't. So well-designed bullets are stable through transonic.
Okay.
Poorly designed bullets are not. So an example of a bullet that and it's a bullet that was in like Army competitive ammunition. So when the Army shot 308 for everything, M14 days,
right.
The M852 was competitive shooting ammunition, and it was loaded with a 168 grain Sierra Match King.
Uh-huh.
The 168 grain Sierra Match King suffers from a problem of dynamic instability. It's because of the angle and the length of the boat tail. So what happens is bullets stay stable in flight because you have a balance between the center of pressure and the center of gravity. So think of an arrow. Center of gravity on an arrow might be like if you hold an arrow and where it balances, that's the center of gravity. Center of pressure is what keeps it sort of longitudinal. So on an arrow, the fletchings are the center of pressure.
Uh-huh.
Without the fletchings, the arrow kind of goes end over end, right? With a bullet, we can't put fletchings on a bullet, so we spin a bullet for gyroscopic stability. So the center of pressure and the center of gravity, as long as they're far enough apart, the bullet is stable. When center of pressure will move on RPMs, okay, so
as it slows down,
the center of pressure starts moving. So when you get to a point to where if the bullet isn't balanced well in flight, it'll get unstable. So that 168 grain Match King out of 308, if you shot that thing past about 800 yards, they would tumble into the target.
And this was our long range ammo.
Well, it was marksmanship ammo.
Yeah.
It said on the box, not for combat use, right? But it was unstable.
Yeah.
As soon as it got below Mach 1.2, it was unstable. It would tumble. It would yaw. You'd see bullets like this.
Wow.
This, like an imprint, like a Bugs Bunny imprint of a bullet in the paper. You wouldn't want to get hit by it.
And this is a whole other conversation for another time, but there's this big misconception that 5.56 tumbles.
Well, yeah, I mean,
normal bullets do not tumble.
No, they don't. I mean, bullets when they hit mediums, whether it's a gel or something, where they tend to yaw, and most bullets tend to break apart. Some bullets are purpose built to maintain their mass. Bullets that are solid monolithic bullets. You look at some of these bullets guys go shoot like dangerous game with. They're like solid copper bullets. So they're designed to like retain all of their weight and just bore as deep as they can into dangerous game. And 5.56, because if you hit, it's extremely high velocity ammunition. 5.56. You're talking about velocities excess of 3,000 feet per second. And so when it hits target, because that velocity, it yaws quickly. The back of the bullet might break off. So guys would, mistakenly think that the bullet was tumbling because the bullet wouldn't go in a straight line once it hit somebody. It would like take a right turn or a left turn that did incredible damage, but that damage was caused just by velocity and things that we know about by shooting high velocity projectiles at gel and water. You can see bullets they have a shock cavitation effect. So, but yeah, bullets. If it's tumbling, it's doing something wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, so that sort of dynamic instability of the 168, that capped the range that you could use that bullet.
Yeah.
So like bullet designs come a long way to where now bullets are stable through that. A well-designed bullet will still hit point first. It'll maintain that same attitude. It'll follow the nose and the boat tail will align with the bullet trajectory. So it won't fly like this. it'll fly and maintain a nose forward orientation all the way to the target, even if it hits at well below subsonic velocity.
So when you're talking ultra long range, what caliber are you shooting?
So the starter caliber is probably a .338 Lobcock.
Okay.
Which is funny because, like, in the regular world, that's like the biggest thing that you probably shoot, right?
Yeah.
So there's a competition that I've been a part of a few years called the King of 2 Mile, and it's down in New Mexico each year around 4th of July. And the first target is about 1,500 yards. And if you make it to the finals, the final target is 2 miles. So there's 1,760 yards in a mile. So the final target is like 3,520 yards. So the caliber you're talking about is
We're talking man-shaped, man-sized targets?
No. So they work out to about 1 minute of angle targets at distance.
Gotcha.
So at that range,
It's
1 minute of angle is 36 inches or whatever.
Okay.
If it's 2 minute of angle target, then it's like 2 yards across, right? 72 inches or whatever. So, but the biggest difference is you have to be able to refine the wind to within 15 degrees and 1 mile an hour. So as a matter of fact, we were talking earlier about some a tactic or a technique in order to define the actual direction of the wind. So when you're looking at mirage, this disturbance in the air, you can see it on a road or on the hood of a car or on the rooftop of a building. If you're looking directly into the wind and the wind is directly from your back, that mirage doesn't appear to have any movement. It kind of goes straight up. It's called a boil. That's the term people use. So if the wind is coming from an angle, for me to find that boil, I actually turn my optics until I see it. So if I know the wind is coming from somewhere in your direction, I would turn my spotting scope or my binoculars until the wind boiled, and that is the actual direction. So to talk about what kind of resolution or fidelity you need, I'll have a compass, or I'll take the compass on my iPhone and I'll shoot an azimuth at the target. I'll find the boil, I'll shoot an azimuth at the boil, I'll get the delta between those 2 degrees. And so if it's like a 59 degree wind relative to my direction of fire, I'll type in the sine of 59 degrees. So 59 degrees, and the sine is 0.857, so that's an 86% wind.
So the notion of a full value wind, a half value wind, a quarter value wind, that's like kindergartner shit for what you're doing.
Well, you can't do it like that because the target. So a useful exercise for anybody to do that shoots competitively or wants to shoot competitively is work out how wide the target is. I talked a little bit about it before. At say 600 meters. And an IPSC size target is about 4 miles an hour across if you're using a 308. If you're using like a 6.5 Creedmoor, it's about 6 miles an hour of wind across. That means that at 0, I can hit the edge, and at 6, it hits downwind edge, right? So when you're talking, even these are really large calibers you're shooting. So a 375 Chi-Tac with a 379 grain Berger bullet with a muzzle velocity of 2,850 feet per second. So that's a 379 grain bullet. That's more than double the weight, right, of a lot of other conventional projectiles that we're shooting, right? And the muzzle velocity is faster than what like a 7.62 is out of a sniper rifle. So very high ballistically effective projectiles, but the bullet is in the air like 8 or 9 seconds. The maximum ordinate, so the highest bullet is in trajectory, is around 600 feet.
Oh my gosh.
So the bullet's like 600 feet in the air. So now I have to calculate not only what the wind is doing where I am, I have to make a guess of what's the wind speed 600 feet up in the air.
Right.
I have to look at the terrain. So I'm shooting across a valley, or there might be 1 or 2 terrain features between me and the target. So you have to start making some assumptions of what the wind is doing, what the terrain is doing to that wind.
The aerodynamics of it.
Right, it's very rare that you're going to have kind of a homogeneous wind from you to the target at those ranges. So a good way to visualize it is like take a bucket of water and just pour it on a terrain model, and as the water runs down, that's pretty much what the wind is doing. Mm-hmm. So you look at like what's the predominant wind? Maybe what's the wind forecast? At what's the winds aloft? I would look at that. And then I start making some assumptions. You also, wind is just air moving. So other things cause the air to move. You have terrain causes the air to move. The time of the day can cause the air to move. So if I'm shooting across the valley and it's in the evening, as air cools down, air goes downhill. And as air heats up, air goes uphill. So if you're out in the desert shooting, there's a range out in Phoenix that we shoot competitions on. And you go out that range at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and the wind is whipping. The flags, the American flag, and you're like, oh my God, dude, this is gonna suck so bad. Wind's 25 miles an hour. And then at 9 o'clock in the morning,
just die.
The wind dies. Because it's heated up all the air, and all that air moving up is causing that wind. So wind will go up and downhill down valleys, or down terrain. So you have to look at that. So you're making all these assumptions based on experience, based on guesses.
Because wind, I learned this in college, a high pressure system collapsing into a low pressure system.
Correct.
So as the temperature increases, that's why it's...
Right, and then that's another factor too, is like if I know I have weather coming in, I have to be able to make some predictions about what the wind is going to do and change during the day, right? And you can make some basic assumptions. There's really good tools. I mean, honestly, I'll go, before I shoot a match like that, I'll go check like Weather Underground. Or any of these apps are like, hey, at 1 o'clock, the wind's going to be at this angle, at this mile an hour.
Really?
And I tell military guys, you've got guys that are paid to be weathermen in the military.
Yeah.
So use those guys as a resource. Like before you go to an area, ask them what the wind's going to be doing. And they'll be able to tell you pretty accurately.
So when you're shooting out at 2 miles...
Yeah.
All of these ballistic computers we've been talking about, your weather meters, the levels you have on the guns, are they helping you at 2 miles, or is there still a little bit of an art in which the science has not yet penetrated?
So there's a couple of answers to that. So number one, you have to think about group size. So if I have a 1 minute of angle gun, that means that at 2 miles, in best case scenario, my gun has a group size of about 40 inches. Now, if my target is like a 36-inch plate, that means that my group, if I have a perfectly centered group, I'm going to miss off of different sides of the plate. So you have to trust your data. So if I miss, I tend not to change my solution. If I see a shot go low, you have to hold back your inclination to hold high.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Because you might just be shooting on the edge of the group size,
right?
And now you've missed off the other side of the groups of the extreme outer edge of the group. That's one thing. The other part of the main challenge in shooting extremely long range is seeing the impact. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And that I think is where there's the biggest opportunity for advancement in that game, is new technology to spot rounds at those ranges. Past around 1,600 meters, you cannot see a 30 caliber bullet hit the ground. You just can't. There's not enough mass to it. Unless you have a perfectly like a dry sandy area, poof, you can see the dust pop up. But if any kind of veg, if the ground is wet at all, there's any kind of grass around the target, if there's plants or trees around, that bullet goes into a dark spot, you're not seeing it. And a thing that we use a lot in shooting is watching the trace of the bullet, right? You've seen that.
Yeah.
So the trace is formed by the bullet going downrange supersonically, and it actually causes like a little bit of like a shock wave. And you can see that. It kind of looks like an invisible boat going down the river.
When I was in sniper section and I didn't know a damn thing, the way it was described to me is like, you remember in the Matrix when they shoot the guns and
exactly.
there's like a little wave behind the bullets?
Yeah, it's the Matrix. It looks like the Matrix, right? Well, that's great, but when your bullet, if the apex of your trajectory is like 300, 400, 500 feet in the air, you can't see it anymore.
Right.
You can see it leave, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And you're not going to see it come back in.
Yeah.
So you lose that as a tool for spotting. So spotting is very, very difficult. So the evolution of extreme long range has gone to bigger calibers and bigger calibers and bigger calibers. So like the current The current guys that are the most successful at this sort of 2 and 3 mile shooting are using calibers like 416 Barrett, which is basically a 50 caliber neck down to .416 that shoots like a 500 or 550 grain bullet at, you know, close to 3,000 feet per second. So they're unusable.
It's like a freight train. Yeah.
Unless you have these massive muzzle brakes.
Yeah.
Right? So, and these muzzle brakes, what they do is they deflect the gases coming out of the barrel. Because recoil, you know, Newton, you know, that guy. So you've got energy coming out that way, it's pushing the rifle back this way. So the higher the caliber, the more recoil or kick it has. So like one of the worst things you can shoot is a 50 caliber bolt action sniper rifle with a suppressor. That is
kick your ass.
It's painful, man. It hurts a lot because there's nowhere for that force to go except straight back, and it's punishing. It just drives straight through you. It's like an impulse that just never stops. And so 50 cal, that's a problem with 50 caliber in military sniping is, guys, if you shoot too much, it'll physically damage your
bruise
body.
the fuck out of your shoulder.
And you get things like detached retinas.
Yeah.
And it'll fuck you up.
And not only that, but your spotter always, you know, it's especially if you're shooting it in like a kind of an arid environment.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, you shoot it and you look back and your spotter, like the scope's like knocked over, his
The
hat's
safest
off.
place to be is right behind the rifle. Everybody else is having a bad day.
Yeah.
It's like, and they're very loud. You have to use like double hearing protection, earplugs, and you know earmuffs and whatever. So, these, in order to, extreme long range shooting is all those things that make it very tough. You have the prediction is difficult because to have an accurate ballistic model, you have to have shot that bullet and been able to have like radar modeling or have a lot of experience where you can true your data out to those extreme ranges. There's not a lot of places you can shoot that stuff. East Coast, there's not a lot of places you can shoot. You have the prediction issue, you have just the precision of the rifle issue. I mean, you know, even if you have a great shooting rifle, when you get to these ranges, your overall group size is probably bigger than the target. And then spotting and seeing impacts is really, really difficult.
Do you think there's a possible technological solution for tracking bullets in this case? Since you can't see the trace, it's really difficult to see the impact at that range. I mean, is there some way you could, I don't know, paint the bullet with some sort of IR, or is there some sort of technology that we could apply to the bullet itself to see where it impacts?
They're working on it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the whole muzzle brake and things like that, because I remember going down the SEAL sniper course and shooting the 300 Win Mag for the first time, and you know, guys were building those up with as much foam and pad, because I mean, it would just bruise the hell out of your shoulder. And moving into these larger caliber weapons, how are they managing recoil with those and everything?
It's by use of muzzle brakes. I mean, so that technology has really advanced to where if you look at things like precision rifle shooting, where which is a sport, you know, and a lot of guys do it, and there's videos out there if you just look on YouTube of like a PRS shooter shooting a caliber like, you know, a 6mm caliber, kind of equivalent to like a 243 or even a 308. And with these muzzle brakes, these guys can almost just put the rifle on a bag or on a rest and just run the bolt and shoot it, and maybe put their hand on top of the scope and almost free recoil, and the gun doesn't move.
Really?
Yeah, so the ideal with these muzzle brakes, they're so good now that you can shoot and you can see your own trace through the scope.
That's impressive.
So there's such little movement of the rifle and optic when you're firing that, boom, you can shoot and you can actually see the trace through your own optic go in. You can spot your own impacts. And that is the big multiplier. If you're shooting by yourself, your ability to make corrections and spot your own impacts. But that's only possible with the use of these brakes and things like that.
Yeah, because I mean, we got to that point with a 308 because, you know, it wasn't that big of a round, and you know, you dial it in tight enough and everything like that, secure enough, and you can like put it round after round after round once you have it down. But then you get to those larger, you know, the larger calibers, and I haven't shot in a long time,
right?
So I just can't imagine how you can maintain that. your follow-on shots or your,
I mean, a lot of that is skill, and a lot of that is training and technique. That's a very important thing to practice.
right.
Train.
But you say the muzzle brake technology is really
yes. So suppressor technology is really, and almost all shooting now, at least in the military environment, is all done suppressed. There's almost no unsuppressed shooting done. So training, zeroing, everything is done suppressed.
Really?
Yes. So that actually adds in some complexities. So because with a suppressor, the way a suppressor works is it kind of distributes the gas, so all the gas doesn't leave the barrel at one time, which makes the sound. That's the report of a rifle firing is more or less the gas is escaping supersonically from the barrel, and it creates that sound, that loud report. Well, your suppressors kind of slow down the migration of the gases out of the barrel and lets them leave it angles them, it baffles them off, so you're eliminating that report. The problem is all the gas gets run through a suppressor, and suppressors get hot. Mm-hmm. So if you're shooting any sort of sustained fire after 10, 15 shots, there's so much heat that suppressor gets so hot that it causes so much mirage. So you have a hard time seeing your target.
Right.
So that's something that guys have to mitigate. There's all kinds of Rube Goldberg things. Like I've seen guys like the little fan like blowing on the guy's suppressor. There's different types of covers guys use that help.
Yeah.
Covers that are heat resistant covers, but once it gets hot, it gets hot.
Right.
And a really high bore line will help that. So if you have your scope 3.5, 4 inches, which is actually fairly common now in these modern systems because
really,
the scopes are really big. They have large objective lenses. They have 56 millimeter objective lenses. The tube, back in the old days, a tube of a scope was an inch or even 7/8, and now they're 30 or even 34 millimeter. Wow. They're big.
What power scope are you using for ultra long range shooting?
So I use a Night Force 7 to 35 power.
7 to 35. Okay.
Yeah. And 5 to 25, 7 to 35, those are usually the power ranges guys are using.
Got some more questions in here I just wanted to get to because I know we're taking up a lot of your time.
I have an itchy nose. I'm not picking my nose.
No, it's okay.
I always pick my nose.
I don't mind. I'm a picker. That's who I am. I was born this way. All right. Ian came back with about his range cards. He says, "I build range cards off of a base 5 mile per hour wind, and then multiply that based on my wind estimate. Is that a logical approach?"
Yeah, that's a good way. So you can do it one of two ways. You can figure out the total effective wind speed. So talking about percentages of wind. So a 12 o'clock wind is 0. A 3 o'clock wind is 100%. 30 degrees or 1 o'clock is 50%. 2 o'clock wind or 60 degrees is about 87%. So you can apply those percentages to his base hold. So he says, okay, I've got 5 miles an hour written down. Personally, I prefer, if you're going to do a system like that, I prefer to use like 4, 8, and 12. Because 5 is a hard number to divide in 2 or to divide in 3, right? But if I have a 4 mile an hour, so if I have a wind hold, if I write down 4 mile an hour hold and an 8 mile an hour hold, if I divide my 4 by 2, which is easy, I have a 2 mile an hour hold. And divide that again by 2, I have 1. If I double 4, I have 8. If I double it and add half, I have 10. So even numbers are always easier to manipulate than odd numbers, mathematically speaking. And most of the stuff is basic arithmetic. So you can take the angle and multiply it by, so you take your wind speed and multiply it by the angle, and that'll give you your effective crosswind. Or you can take your base wind hold and multiply it by the angle. So it's a 5 mile an hour, I have 5 mile an hour hold, I have 5 mile an hour, so my 5 mile an hour dope will tell me maybe it's a drift of 4 minutes of angle, and it's a 1 o'clock wind. I just divide my dope. So I take 50% of 4 minutes of angle is 2 minutes of angle, that's my data. So it's just the math. It's wherever you want to do the arithmetic. You can either do the arithmetic on the wind angle and the wind velocity to get your total crosswind, or you can apply the arithmetic to your full value dope, and you're going to get the same thing. But the important thing that you have to do in both scenarios is know what those angles are. So my amended, making it easy to do arithmetic in your head, my wind values by angles, the way I do it is, so 12 o'clock is 0. I'm at 15 degrees or every half an hour. So 12 o'clock is 0, 15 degrees is 25%. 1 o'clock or 30 degrees is 50%. 45 degrees or 130 is effectively 75%. The sign of that is 0.71. I rounded up to 75. 2 o'clock wind is 60 degrees. It's 87%. I rounded up to 90. Because it's easy to take a tenth off of something.
Right.
And then anything past 2, I call full value. Because the wind percentage for a 230 wind is like 0.96. You might as well call it full value.
Right.
So if you, starting at 2 o'clock, if you round everything to 100% past 2 o'clock, you're probably only going to be off, less than 5-6% of the wind. And that's lost in the noise. You're not going to see that on the target. If I have a 10 mile an hour wind and I'm off 6%, that's 10 miles an hour or 9.4 miles an hour. You're probably not going to see that on the target.
Andrew wanted to ask, there's a question about, would it be a smart thing to consolidate all sniper schools in one location? So you guys have been talking about the SEAL sniper course, the Marines have their Scout sniper course, there's SODIC, or now the Special Forces sniper course, sniper school, there's the Benning sniper course, all these different schools. Should they be consolidated in one location?
No. So number one, every school or whoever its customer is, they have their own culture, right?
Yeah.
So the Marine Corps has their culture. It's good that Marines are training Marines, right? The Navy course, for SEALs, they know what they need to do to be operationally as
and they have their requirements for a maritime environment, and that probably Rangers don't have.
And the basic Fort Benning sniper course is probably it is a baseline course. It's a great course. The current guys down there at the Fort Benning course are seriously switched on dudes, and so they run a great school down there, and it's great baseline stuff. But when you get up to CFSIC, at Fort Bragg, the Special Forces sniper course, you're getting into other things that are the capabilities that they want a special operations sniper to be able to do.
Is that so? It's not SODIC anymore, I guess.
No, they changed the name a few years ago.
Sorry. Anyway.
So I think that the sniper school should serve its customer and what they need out of that guy. So, I get the best example is the Fort Benning sniper course. That's like the basic course. That's like the basic level that anybody with a Bravo 4 skill identifier in the Army is expected to be at. And they graduate a really good product, that guy is super capable. But, at CFSIC, they do more stuff with moving targets. They might do stuff with that, how does that sniper operationally work with guys that are doing things assaulting?
They have, at least the last I knew, they had the collex. It was between the Special Forces sniper course and Sephardic. So it was the snipers working directly with the assaulters, which is how they're supposed to work overseas, when they deploy.
Yeah, I mean, I know POIs change and things like that, but if that's a capability that they want, then they can train it like that inside. So I don't think they should all be consolidated because you're not really getting the product for the customer.
Alex asks, what are the differences and challenges of working with non-military units like the FBI HRT, U.S. Secret Service, CAT, which is Counter Assault Team, I believe, and private organizations like nuclear security folks?
So I've done some training with folks like that. Most of those guys are former soft guys, almost always. So, if you're working with Department of Energy snipers,
even the nuke security guys,
they're all Rangers, SF, SEALs,
JSOC
Marine,
guys,
JSOC. So it's really the same. The challenges are Sometimes their gear is dissimilar from something that you've worked with before. They may want a specific capability train. They may have a metric they have to meet. I did some law enforcement training, and I did some training with FBI. I haven't worked with HRT, but I've worked with like various FBI field offices, SWAT team stuff. And those guys, they have some liability issues, and I've worked with regular local law enforcement.
Our ROE is going to be very
their
different
ROE,
than the
and they have liability. They have actual hey, bro, check it out for real. I might be in a courtroom
right.
with like a high paid defense attorney.
If they're FBI, they're going to be in a courtroom regardless.
Yeah.
Because it's part of an investigation.
So depending on, they may want to work on like short range stuff. They may want to work on limited visibility. You tailor the training to whatever the requirements are. But within most of those organizations, U.S. Marshals or DOE, whoever, invariably they're almost like, you are like, dude, so you play the guy, right away, and they're all former soft guys.
Yeah, a lot of law enforcement, isn't it generally? It's short. It tends to be shorter range, and they're going more for like fast paralysis and things like that.
I mean, the average law enforcement shot, I think the number changes based on engagements and research, but it's no greater than about 80 yards.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So most of those law enforcement, interdictions that happen probably happen between about 50 and like 80 yards.
It's a permissive versus non-permissive environment,
and they're getting one shot, and they have to figure it out, and they've got to coordinate all that stuff. So those guys, whenever I've trained law enforcement guys, the end state is, can the guy hit a 1-inch pasty on command within 100 yards?
Yeah.
That's it. That's what they want out of that guy. And be able to do it quick, be able to something military guys don't do a lot of. Military guys do train it, but like counting down to shoot.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Coordinating.
Coordinating.
Multiple snipers.
Yeah.
Right. So multiple snipers. So whether it's the guy that's running the whole deal, the SWAT commander, he's on the radio and he's telling guys on a countdown.
Yeah.
That takes training.
Yeah.
The first time that you're teaching guys to do that, or you're putting them on a clock, or you're giving them, they've got a voice in their head when they have to shoot, they shoot like a can of smashed ass.
Yeah.
It's not, they're not.
A lot of jerking the trigger.
Yes. So that's something that has to be trained.
Yeah.
100%.
I love this one.
That's a technical term, can of smashed ass.
Hammered shit, that's a technical term.
Yeah.
You're going to love this one. Is the 1993 movie Sniper a faithful depiction of snipers, or the most faithful depiction of snipers?
I'm not. I really enjoyed the movie Sniper.
You gotta respect Zane. Yeah,
he
was trying.
Firing bullets and things like that.
The burrs off the
Gucci flies.
Yeah.
There were some elements of that movie which I think were accurate, others which were grossly inaccurate. But the movie Shooter,
the Wahlberg
movie, and the Shooter series, I know some guys that were like technical guys on those, and so if you want to bullet nerd out and you watch those. The movie or the series, all the math's right, typically. Which is why you always got the guy like, he's covered in Cheeto dust, like 4.1, what the hell, man? It's not, it's 3 point, write the letter to the editor, meatloaf, right? That guy. I think nowadays guys are really careful because they know that the people that want to watch the movies are probably the guys that are going to call shenanigans on that stuff.
And the audience is like, there is an audience for those films that are like much smarter than they were, 20 years ago.
They're enthusiasts.
Yeah.
So the guy might be a shooter. He's interested in it. He might be watching the movie with his ballistic.
That's not the kind of gear SEALs carry. What the fuck is this?
Yeah. You see that across the board, like that SEAL Team series that's out right now. There's legitimate SOF veterans like working
Yeah.
in and on that show.
Yeah.
And you can tell. I mean, obviously it's a TV show, and all TV shows are like really hokey, and so.
Yeah.
But you can tell just by the way that the guys kind of do their thing, or the gear, or the kit, or how they talk about the gear.
How they hold their guns.
It's pretty legit. Because they know that, hey, the guys, there's, the veterans, we have a veteran population that's, we've been in combat 19 years, 18 years. So like, a lot of people watching that show have real life experiences they're bouncing that stuff off of.
Right.
So
they'll be talking mad shit in the comments section if it's not right.
I've had the privilege of being being a technical advisor type of guy to a few authors who have written doing some sniper type stuff in a book. So a guy will say, hey man, I got this scene, and in the scene they're going to do this. What do you think about that? And so they'll send me like a thing, and I'll make some recommendations about, well, it might be more realistic if you change this. You tell them, hey, we're shooting at this range and this wind or whatever. There's an author named John Ringo.
Oh yeah, I read all of his books.
So John's a pretty good friend of mine. And so in his I
read all the sci-fi books when I was in the Army. Yeah.
Right. So his series about the guy that is a Navy SEAL and ends up like being a warlord essentially in Georgia. I helped John with a couple of scenes in that, and I think he wrote me into at least one of the books. There's a character called Praz in those books. Yeah.
Andrew says,
buy John Ringo books.
How do you think 3D printing will affect military vendors? Like, are your Finnish overlords worried about 3D printing?
That's so awesome. That guy must know me.
As a sea of change event in their industry. I kid about his Finnish overlords.
That's a term I use personally, so that guy must know me, or I must have talked to him before. 3D printing has changed a lot with weapon design, not in the final production thing, because the 3D print metal, you're talking millions and millions of dollars.
NASA does it. I talked to an engineer. Like, they will, like, if they need a part, no shit, for a space shuttle or rocket, it's a metal 3D printer, and they put the specs into it, go home, and that thing just prints out the part while they're asleep.
So, as my dad used to say, that's folding money.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So most 3D printers print extruded plastic.
Money.
Right, but what that does help is prototyping. So we actually use 3D printing at the AMU for kit improvements, whatever, to prototype something if it works. So 3D printing has changed that for at least especially for prototyping. The way bullets are being made and cartridge cases, things like that are being made, are still more or less the traditional way. I will say the biggest single change and advancement in ammunition manufacturing is polymer cases and multi-component cases. So you have a case where it's made up of two different materials. Maybe part of the case is metal, part of the case is polymer, and you can rapidly change the dimensions of that cartridge case because you're just talking about extruding plastic or changing the shape of it. And you can hold plastic to ridiculous tolerances, and it's lighter. It keeps less heat in the weapon system. So polymer is probably the next big thing, especially in military stuff.
For casing.
Yeah, I mean, now...
It can handle the pressure?
It can,
wow, that's amazing.
Can. So in military aviation, it's a big deal right now, because polymer casing, so if you have 50 caliber ammunition and it's polymer,
you can carry more.
About 3 cans of polymer is the same weight as 2 cans of conventional 50 cal.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you start thinking about those applications with like aircraft and full weights of ammunition and full weights of fuel, that's a meaningful change.
Yeah, especially with a lighter bird, like a little bird or something like that, lighter birds,
In difficult to read situations, what do you use to gauge wind? In the absence of trees, flags, smoke, and mirage, what do you resort to next?
So, there's a chart that it's been in every marksmanship manual since the Civil War, and it says something like 0 to 3 miles an hour. You can see smoke begin to drift. 4 to 6 or 4 to 7. You can feel the wind on your face and things like that. So there's always something to look at with the wind. You just have to find it. So, for example, if you can't see mirage in front of you because you're shooting over dead space, so you're on a hilltop and your target's on another hilltop and you got a valley dead space, the way mirage works is mirage is the different layers of air heated at different temperatures relative to the ground temperature. So the higher you get off the ground, the less mirage there is to see. So I'm shooting off a cliff and I look out there, I'm probably not going to see any mirage. However, if you turn around and look behind you, you can probably see mirage. If you have like a flat area behind you, turn around and look behind you, you can see mirage. Just remember that if I look this way and the wind is blowing this way, and I turn back around that way, the wind relative to me looking this way is out of the right. When I turn back around this way, it's out of the left.
Right.
So there's usually something to look at. Like I know, for example, if I stand flat-footed on the ground, the wind, the buffeting of the wind kind of, you know, if you're ever sitting there, all of a sudden the wind like takes you a little bit off your balance. For me, that's like 14 miles an hour. Like I know when I can feel the wind in my beard. So the beard is very important for wind reading, for rumination. The wizard beard is important. Like, but there's always something to look at. But you just have to find it. You have to find it. And if there's nothing else besides that, you know, you have the bullet, you have your first shot. You can, if you can, and if it's permissive, you can send a spotter round in there. You could send a round maybe in front of your target that the target can't see, or behind the target, to where you can just shoot low and look at some splash, look at the dust drift. So those are some techniques you can use too. Obviously, situational dependent. If you shoot a competition, sometimes it's worth it to burn one low just to catch the wind.
Yeah.
To go back on the target. Because like a lot of these PRS matches, the target has like dead space behind it. So if you miss left or right, you can't see shit. The bullet's gone. So guys will burn one low, catch the wind, go on their target, and then they'll shoot.
Do you feel that, like, to make up for that 20 years that people don't have to spend at the range, if somebody carries like an anemometer around with them, and like, you know, 5-10 times a day, they just kind of go, okay, the wind feels like 2 miles an hour, come from that direction, they pull out the anemometer and go, okay, it's 4.
Great. That's a great idea, and actually it's something I recommend when I train guys. So when I was in the Army, you know, when I retired, I was a sergeant first class, and it was great. I had privates. Privates are awesome because you can have them do all kinds of shit. So what I would do is I would send a guy downrange with a radio and like a wind meter, and I like stand next to that bush, and I look at the bush through my binos or my spotting scope, and I look at and I say to myself, that looks like it's 8 miles an hour wind. I'm like, what's the wind meter? What's the wind meter say? He's like, it says 5 miles an hour, Sergeant. I'm like, oh. So that's not 5. That's not 8. It's 5.
Yeah.
So calibrate my eyes. So I tell guys, competition shooters, military guys, get like 2 walkie-talkies. You buy at, you know, Home Depot or Target. Get 2 wind meters, some binos, and like get a couple hundred yards from it.
Yeah.
And like talk back and forth. What's, you know, try to estimate the wind at a guy's position. Stand next to some long grass. Stand next to some veg. Stand next to a flag. Whatever it is. And try to figure out what the wind is doing at that guy. It's a great training tool.
Yeah, it's this same concept as like your range estimation, where you're like, oh, I think it's this. Well, the range estimator, the laser estimator actually says.
Yeah.
You're all fucked up.
Calibrate your eyes, yeah.
I think you already kind of addressed this one. How do you prioritize wind based on distance? At the muzzle, halfway, at the target? I think...
we talked about that
before we were on.
So it's a video that we'll just put up for supporters of the stream later on. We actually talked... Actually, I'm going to answer that question like very much in depth.
Yeah.
So...
Andrew has a question. We missed. How does a competitive shooter's competitive lifespan compare to the normal athletic career?
So, again, shooting is a sport that is very long-lived. Depends on the shooting sport, right? So, if it's like Olympic style shooting, guys can shoot into their 40s and 50s. NRA style, like prone long range, there's guys winning national championships in their 70s. At the Olympic level, for like, you know, small bore and air rifle, air pistol, you're probably not getting too far past 40. It's more about resiliency. You might be good for 1 day, 2 days, but it kind of aggregates and adds up. But, I mean, the oldest Olympian to ever win a medal was in shooting.
Really? Yes. Do you know how old they were?
So there was an event that's not held anymore. It was actually long range shooting in like the 1896 London Olympics, and I think the dude was in his 60s.
Wow.
Won an Olympic.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, curling, you might have a shot at it with curling.
What is it about age? Yeah. Is it that your eyes start going? Is that it?
Yeah, eyes start going. Your resting heart rate goes up. Maybe the guys don't handle heat very well. I mean, you're shooting outside in a lot of these events, so it's really hot. Your ability just to weather that stuff. You've been in 90 degree heat all day. You're probably your eyesight is deteriorating. Eyesight's a big thing too. Even though we have optics, but your visual acuity, how it lasts over the day. Some of that can be managed by diet and hydration and rest and things like that. But those basic elements, the side is on the young guy. It always is.
So, Emil, I got a question. I mean, we've taken up a lot of your time. We should probably start wrapping up fairly soon. But I wanted to play devil's advocate with you for a moment because I know this question is, it's always going to be in the back of somebody's mind as far as, these big brains at the Pentagon and the way technology is advancing. They're going to say, what the fuck do we really need you guys for? We have all these advances in drone technology, in ISR. We have these cameras that can see, a goat's ball sack from 5 miles away. We got drones that can fire. I mean, now they have, what do they call that Ninja Hellfire missile where the blades come out and they kill the guy inside the car without any explosion. I mean, isn't the sniper of the future a Predator drone firing a Hellfire missile loaded with cement and hitting some guy in the forehead? I mean, what the hell do we need these snipers for? What do they do as we progress into this century?
I think you're always going to need a human being on the ground. If the technology changes to where if I have a weapon system, if I have a platform that if I press a button, it interrogates the air between me and the target, tells me the exact wind speed because it reads it with photons or whatever it is. If I have a bullet that I can actually self-correct, I shoot the shot and maybe I can keep an identifier on it and it keeps it in there. Snipers are a very cost-effective tool, number one. I remember when the Iraq War started and, there's all, reporters were embedded and this one group of guys was taking fire from a crew serve position and it was like maybe 300-400 meters away. These guys are behind their Humvees, they're on the downslope and they freaking bring a dude out with a javelin and they smoke this machine gun bunker with a javelin. And they're like, that was awesome! But you could just hear the groaning, at the command level, like, they did what with a what?
With an $80,000 missile.
Yeah.
They shot a machine gun nest with an $80,000 missile. In terms of cost-effective thing, I think it's a very effective tool. And, the ability to see what's going on in real time, the ability to support assaulters or a maneuvering element that has a thinking guy behind it that knows what those guys are doing is huge. That's a huge force multiplier. I don't think that'll ever go away. All the reconnaissance and intelligence assets that a sniper can bring to it. If it's not stalking like Carlos did, maybe it's driving a drone in there and being able to take that feed and then integrate it with the systems that you currently have. So I think having guys that as an additional duty or as a specialized duty, been able to interdict targets at long range, be discriminatory. That's the biggest thing in the modern battlefield. ROE. Right. It's not Dresden. We can't just bomb an entire city.
It's not Stalingrad.
Yeah. Right. So that ability to be discriminate and have ROE, and that's a huge part of the way that we do now and probably will continue to do warfare.
Where the enemy is just integrated with the civilian population.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you get that guy? You're not going to, yeah, you can call me. If we have drone technology that can, whatever, but in real time, how do you do that? That's a sniper.
Absolutely. And it's amazing just how far it's come and listening to you talk about how data-driven it is. More so than, it always was to an extent, but now, it's just incredible some of the sensors you have to...
Almost to the point, sometimes it's too much. Like, I would say this, whenever I train military guys and I would say, hey man, what's your data for 900 meters? If they have to go, I'm like, bro, so you should have some things memorized. Like, so if you don't have any of your data, if you don't have your solver, like some of that old school stuff is okay.
Right.
Like when Dave was a sniper, when you were a sniper, like having that
taped to your butt stock.
Yes, having it memorized
right?
or having it taped to your butt, like that stuff's not bad. That's the one thing that I think is an issue with this data-driven sort of, goddamn millennials. But that's millennials, by the way, have been fighting the war for like 20 years, getting medals of honor and all kinds of shit. So I got, millennials are okay in my book from a Gen Xer.
Fucking kids.
Yeah, but that losing that as a core competency of having stuff memorized so you can be nimble.
Yeah.
That's important. So as long as guys are doing those sort of basics, those sort of things that you should be doing for due diligence, if you're a professional, if you honor your craft, then I think the technology is great. It just supplements that.
So, Emil, you've been super gracious with your time coming down here and doing this tonight.
Much, yeah.
I mean, this has been like literally, this dude just gave us and all of you guys watching a master class on long-range marksmanship, and if you were to invoice us, I shudder to goddamn think what
I honestly feel like we could go another 3 hours.
I got easy pass, so it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like RFK and whatever I gotta go over.
Yeah, no, we could go another 3 hours easily. This is just such a huge topic.
We would love to have you on again sometime.
Be my pleasure.
Yeah.
We'll link up either in person or digitally. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you wanted to plug that you're doing with work? Do you do training courses that people can come and find you?
No. I don't really hang a shingle out publicly. Usually the stuff that I do, training stuff.
You don't do many interviews either.
Is military stuff, but. I work for a company which makes some products. So the company I work for is Lapua, Burger Bullets, and Vitavori Powder, and SK Rimfire Ammunition. So we make all those products. I'm the military BD guy for all that stuff, but I would look at our, the Burger ammunition. Factory loaded ammunition is probably some of the best factory ammunition you could buy in the world. Our products, they're all leaders in the industry, whether it's a Burger Bullet, a Lapua cartridge case, Burger ammunition, Vitavori powder, all that stuff. So check all that stuff out. Our brand, freaking buzzwords, but our brand identity is for like the precision guy that wants the best in the world. So some of our stuff costs more than our competitors, but we pride ourselves on being the best in all those segments. So you want to drive an M5, or do you want to drive a Pinto with a LS1 motor in it? So you want the M5.
A Morris Minor.
Yes.
Guys, thank you everyone who joined us tonight. We had a whole bunch of people watching live, and everyone else will be able to check this out. It'll be on YouTube. Until the EMP takes us all out. Yeah. It'll be up on SoundCloud. Now we're up on Apple iTunes.
We are on iTunes.
Yeah.
Look for The Team House on iTunes. We're there. We've only included episodes with interviews in them. And nobody wants to listen to just Jack and I.
And all the future ones will show up.
All the future ones. And if you are part of our Patreon, thank you very much. We have some footage that we recorded earlier with Emil for that. If you're not a member of our Patreon, please help us pay our rent. $1 a month.
The link is down in the description if you want to check it out.
And please subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell, the notification if you haven't already. Did you say that? I don't know.
No, but I'm glad you threw it out.
Yeah. And sorry that we didn't get to all the other questions that weren't. The subreddit. The subreddit are the Team House. And we didn't have time.
Well, I'm available if any of those questions that are in the subreddit, if I can just vector me in on that, I'd be happy to answer any question.
Yeah.
I'm an open book.
You're the man.
Thank you so much for your time, Emil.
Yeah.
It's great.
Been my pleasure.
Really. I mean, this is like expert advice. Like I said, this is like Jim West is the guy to talk to about martial arts. This is the guy to talk to about marksmanship.
I'm the guy to talk to about cheese puffs. Like, I love cheese puffs.
They're so good.
They are good, right? It's the texture.
I'm the guy to talk to about comic books and Dungeons and Dragons, and
I was a dungeon master.
Hey, this is what we have.
Look at all our stuff.
I come down
You
here.
should come play with us.
All right, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
No, bring your kids because I bring my daughter down here and play.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my only real claim to fame. Otherwise, I'm just a podcast guy, I guess. But no, this has been great. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
this Friday we have a gift for you also. We actually have 2 live streams this week. So we have Emil, who graciously gave it him, and on Friday at 8 p.m. we have Jeff Kirkham from Ready Man joining us. It'll be remote, but join us. He's got a lot of new fun stuff going on. If you've seen his past interviews or whatnot, so it'll be great. So thanks, guys.
all right, that's a wrap.